I think that allowing for the book being, after all, a parody, something like 1984 could actually happen. This is the direction the world is going in at the present time. In our world, there will be no emotions except fear, rage, triumph, and self-abasement. The sex instinct will be eradicated. We shall abolish the orgasm. There will be no loyalty except loyalty to the party. But always there will be the intoxication of power. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.
What's going on, everyone? It's Nina Infinity. Welcome to my channel on this Wednesday. This is Breaking the Narrative, and tonight my guest is going to be the very awesome, the very mysterious, the very kind of weird Andreas Xerxes. What's going on? How are you?
Good. That's a better. I love that one. I get these like really sterile and Andreas. He had a job, like he did stuff, but this is better. The Rasputin. I like that. That's a better aesthetic. Thank you.
Yeah, that's I mean, I figured. Well, that's kind of like the pre-show for all the for all my shows, because we are living in like 1984.
Right? I love that. Thank you so much for reminding me the line. We shall abolish the orgasm. Our neurologists are working upon it now.
Yes, that is what is happening currently. But how are you, man? It's good to see you again. And
you too.
I'm happy that you're here. This is going to be an awesome show. But for those of you,
you were well liked on my podcast. Even the flat earthers were like, I know she's a little weird, but
really, my God, my husband told me that he watched the show and like he was like, you lost the crowd when you told them you don't like flat Earth.
Isn't
like,
that funny how people exist? But you know what? It's okay. You only lost 30% of. It's like you can't have a crowd that's just one group of people. That's how you end up with what the world's like now.
Yeah, totally. It's like, well, I mean, you're not going to be liked by everybody. So
but you were liked by everybody. That was the funny point. They're like, I know she's a little, she doesn't really get the, but you know what? I like her.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good. I have nothing but love for most people on Earth, except for a certain amount of people. Like
haters
Fauci.
Gonna hate. Oh yeah. Well, I have a weird amount of love for, because I'm distant enough from it. Like if I had enough family members die or something like that, you imagine it's like a Palestine thing. But with Fauci, he's mainly just funny to me because he's just so foolish and he's such a track record guy. And these track record guys who suck so hard eventually become relevant again when the next generation gets graduated and haven't watched the reruns. And I'm a big rerun guy. I grew up without cable. I had access.
So did I.
Yeah, reruns are huge. And so I remember talking to people like, and it felt like a compliment when you talk to someone who's like 30, 40, 50 years older and they're like, how do you know that? I vaguely remember that. How could you even know that? Because I just saw it. It gives you a special power to know what the world's going through. So Fauci did not.
There's a lot of patterns too, right? Like, it's all about picking up those pattern recognition.
It's amazing. We really should write more books about people that escape their patterns. Like if Fauci had changed after the AIDS crisis and had redeemed himself, I would watch that movie, read that book. You know what I mean? Because it would be like if Kevin Smith played him. But now we've got this other thing where it's like it's this guy who keeps sucking. and he won't stop sucking. It's Sisyphus with a boulder, and he must be happy. And it's just it's fatiguing. You know?
Yeah, it's continuous, like failing upwards. People, like pretty much everyone. Travis Nick Klung, thank you so much for the $2. Says eat.
Yeet, bro. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for that super chat. Andreas, for those people that don't know who you are, please let them know who you are and where they can find you and where you're all about.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, like, I guess you said it best, because I bet it's not the first time I heard it. Like the other night I was calling Danny Polishchuk's low value mail, and I had a similar kind of scenario. I was like, that guy is great. He's weird. Great. But I mean, so I am from California. I think is the easiest way to start that. You know, I'm from Silicon Valley. I'm from the internet, and I'm born a few months before the earthquake. And so the earthquake was a big deal. The San Andreas Fault Line earthquake destroyed all this 18th century, 19th century architecture in California that people don't remember, that there was these steam railroad trains and these Victorian buildings. And it was like the destiny of, you know, there was the vacation destination for the elite, that they would take these trains and they would get to, it was all proximal. But now, you know, you in the mountains, I couldn't get access to radio, right? Like you go over the hill from San Jose into Santa Cruz, and in San Jose, the radio is normal. It's like, hey, everybody, welcome to K-Don. This is my favorite song. This is this new person that just called. She's got this new family, and she wants us to go to this place. And give her the new go. Blah, 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 blah. And it goes as you go over the mountain.
You get the stat.
And then in Santa Cruz, it's this like Chernobyl-like Siberian gulag of architects and intellectuals and lesbians and feminists and third, fourth, fifth wave feminists arguing with vapor Shariites and, you know, Robert Anton Wilson. It's a weird town. And the radio is like, the views and expressions expressed on KZSC do not necessarily reflect those of the university or the Tavistock mind control experiment or the FCC. And you get this kind of bigger kind of experience from that. I think that's weird. You know, if you have an elementary school daycare that's run by Satanists that clean up beaches, and you have a Wiccan in your school board, or as a teacher, it's not that weird to imagine Wiccans and Satanists in politics. And I think that this is a thing. So many people are shocked by something, and they can't confront how historic or how routine it really is. So I am a weirdo. I am from weird. I'm numb to weird. And I also am educated. I went to school and I studied nanotechnology and engineering and also computer sciences. And I worked for NASA. I did internships for the Discovery program to do, which is it was a university-like experience that they built around the community Foothill College to connect to NASA so that we could do stoichiometric indexing. I was doing stoichiometric indexing of different kinds of compounds and materials that could be used. And I was working on graphene, and I invented a way of using laser to burn away at carbon that had been dried, so you could burn a pattern into some carbon and graphite and make graphene. So that was what I was doing. But then I decided, you know, I don't know about this, because I was also doing that because I figured I couldn't be in media. So I got a job in media. I was working for CNN. I did their social media planning and productions, and then Flight 370 happened. And so imagine CNN then, right? And you've got people literally saying, you know, black holes could be responsible and everything. And we have all the data. We're looking at all these islands and seeing there's the Diego Garcia MI6 British intelligence island that has been turned into a CIA rental, you know, in this area. And there's plenty of other stories that could go with. But, you know, that soured my perspective a bit about news. And I had already thought CNN was kind of weird, but I figured, hey, it was kind of, you know, my parents could respect the name. They've heard it. It's serious, you know, so do that. But then I left and I went to South America, and I lived in South America, and I was just, you know, for about a year, and saw so many weird things, and was involved with, I was doing correspondence journalists activities for Guardian and BBC, and had a lot of friends involved with that as well. And we were getting really involved with like Fernandez Kushner and Niesman's
so you're like really involved in like mainstream media.
I was, yeah. But and then I worked for Tim Pool and Timcast, and now I'm doing my own thing. But I was a lot more mainstream, and in fact, you know, I have a lot of friends who were involved with both sides of the like extremes, like the Young Turks people. I know several people who worked on that show. I nearly worked on it myself. It would have been a lot to handle. But then again, you know, the other side's not always that much better either. Dealing with, you know, I am not left or right. You know, I am of the people versus the elite. I think the elite have two shades. They've got a blue and a red shade, maybe, with like gradients in between. But it's the elite against the people, and the people have switched that into fighting themselves, which is a brilliant strategy. But you know,
that's pretty close to like what I am too. Like, I think we used to be called centrists, but apparently those don't exist anymore.
Right.
Like,
I don't think I'm a centrist. See, I'm a heterodox. So I believe in I find that the extreme Marxists and the extreme right actually are the same thing. They shoehorn back, and the centrics. The problem with centricism, even though it kind of makes sense because it's true, but it's the you want to be at the pillars, because the part where you become centric is where you start to lose yourself more and more. And you see this, the Democrats focus on this point, that you should lose yourself to the party, lose yourself to the broadness of the tent, right? As opposed to saying, hey, you know, we really care about these things. And isn't it amazing that Marxists also care about gun rights? Isn't that, you know, because it's a tangible thing. Once you move beyond the abstracts, people care about their weed, their children, their guns, their rights, you know, things like that, their property. And so,
food on the table, property,
food. And so that connects a lot of people, you know, and so we fight against each other, but I'm sorry, I forgot why it mattered. What was the point? But
no, it's just like we're talking about like the centrist idea, right? Like, it's like, because I for the longest time, I was liberal, like very liberal left, back in the day when I was in Vancouver, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, as time went on and I grew up, I was like, well, maybe I'm not so left. Like, maybe I'm starting to understand why people want to have guns, you know, and I was very anti-gun, and I'm like, you know, maybe I'm starting to kind of understand it from this side, or like, you know, when it comes to like abortion or something like that, maybe I'm starting to kind of hear the other side a little bit of why they think certain things or whatever. I'm hearing you out. I understand what you're saying, like, to that other side. And so it felt like this, but at the same time, it also felt like I was kind of still, like I was standing still, and then the left just kept going further away from me, because they were just becoming so extreme in everything that they were doing, that I felt like I was actually still in the same place. I was like, I'm actually the same person. Like, I haven't really changed all that much. There's like a, you know, one or two things here and there, but it seems like that side's actually is the one that's changing. So
people don't seem to want to admit that. And so remind me back, Aristotelianism and the Aristotelian Republic. But I was thinking about Bill Maher recently a lot, and Bill Maher, you know, it was fascinating to me to see him tear apart the trans issue, because I've been so exhausted by hearing about the trans issue from the right, that to hear the identical verbiage from the left, in other words, you know, the real left, because we think of the left as being these extreme factions, the way the left think that the right are this extreme faction. There's only this one little group. It's everybody, whether they admit it or not, you know. But no, there's a lot of the left who are like, what the heck, you know? And
like the classic liberals
increasing, and classic liberals. And so classic liberals, there you go, Aristotelianism. We're not about, and so you're a patriot in a weird way, because
I've never heard that word before, by the way, what you just said.
Aristotle's Republic. Right. So the idea of Aristotelianism is that there is a way we want things to be that's objective. It's not. So the left is
objective reality. Yes, I'm all about that.
The left is moving. They're moving always. The left is a moving thing. It is always to progress theoretically. And it's not always the case, because imagine when you get to the point where it is conservative to conserve the Soviet Union, right? Once you have the thing. And this is where a lot of liberals like Bill Maher from the classical liberal stance, they're not classically liberals. They're libertines, but they're all about the Aristotelian Republic. They're Aristotelian Republicans. They want to have this republic where there's self-determination beyond that democracy system, which could take it all away, because any right is up to the discussion if there's a democracy. But in an Aristotelian Republic, no, these are certain objective values, and it would take at least, you know, a newarchy of brilliant philosopher kings to work together in order to change that. We're not going to just have it up for discussion by people who watch TV. And we're at that point where they're like, oh, well, these guys believe this, and they believe in the internet's theories about these things. Well, you know, in other words, they're informed voters. They're informed by misinformation or information at all. What is abstract truth in the postmodern world? Sure. But you know, this is what it's important to recognize. Democrats have a problem with democracy. They should, because it's a weapon. It's used to take out Iraq. It's used to take away the self-determination of the minority.
I mean, there's so many points that you just made that I'm like, yes, it's all true. But to Bill Maher, to your point about Bill Maher, though, like that's one of the people that I've always kind of had an issue with as well, because, I've watched Bill's shows for a long time. I kind of stopped after a while, but like,
Of course,
Bill was a big time, liberal
he's a great
guy.
Comedian. He was a comedian. Great comedian. Who was also clever. Yeah.
And he's an atheist, which I resonated with when I was younger, and then I decided I'm not an atheist. That was a very short
right. He doesn't mature past breaking down the old, he doesn't
right. But I always felt like Bill was one of those people that kind of just went with the tide. Like if it was, if it's not cool to be woke anymore, Bill's gonna be the first on the scene. You know what I mean? Like it's like one of those things where I feel like he's been around long enough to know when the tide is turning, and now he's starting to say things because the tide is turning. That's how I kind of feel about Bill.
I definitely don't feel like he's super strong to his values or anything like that, especially if you watch him over time. But there are specific things he cares about, which are, again, his marijuana, his right to have affairs, his lifestyle, his Playboy lifestyle. He's got
his like Apollo. Anti-religious stand. It's always been the same way. It's always been the same thing.
But he does kind of have to admit that the group that he has tried to push into, they've done everything to destroy his capacity to live that lifestyle.
But that's the funny part about him, because I always like kind of blamed him and people like him for where we are now. Like I'm like, Bill, you're the woke guy. Like you're the one.
He's an influencer.
Yes.
He's saying straight up lies. And it's like, how could you possibly, you went to Cornell. How could you possibly, you're an actor. How can we believe you?
Exactly. And it's like, you're the guy that's been kind of pushing that narrative for so long. And then once you've created that narrative, and then once it's there, and then you're like, whoa, like maybe I kind of got fucked up. Like I feel like that's how Bill kind of feels, maybe like, oh no, like I didn't realize what monster I was creating. It's kind of like, Frankenstein's tale, right? Like you're like, oh no, it's Frankenstein. I've created it. What do I do now?
That's what a lot of the 60-year-old classic liberals, as you said. I mean, someone I see says, he's a libertarian womanizer, and he's not. He's a libertine womanizer, and it's a huge difference. To be a libertine is this idea of, 16th century England. They had syphilis, and people had sex in the streets, and it was okay. It was before the Puritan period, when everything clamped down, because the pendulum swings, right? And he sees the pendulum swinging, but it would be great for more of the liberals to recognize this idea. And I would love to see both parties full reorganize in the sense that, hey, let's start doing some swaps for the teams, because there's not just people, but full on factions of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party should switch. And it might be better to do it based on the actual word versus what people think the word means, right? So the idea that they're for a majorative dictatorship that is a democratic despotism, where the self-determination is limited by the elite, which are the mass populace average normative, right? The normative, right? Or if we want to change democracy in some way, have representation to have an anti-normative democracy, however you guys want to do that. But then bring over some of these classic liberals to the Republican sphere, because the Christian right and the conspiracy theorists, to a broader extent, that's not a party issue, right? It shouldn't be. And the Christian right has had been a very large voting bloc for a long time, and it's important because they bring a lot of they bring an important level to the issues. But the representation of the Republican Party to be associated with the Christian right doesn't really make sense to the idea of this Aristotelian republic, which would include Bill Maher and people like that, who literally just want to have maximized amounts of self-determination, whatever we're calling it, the pursuit of happiness. And then it would flow back into the idea of the economy. But the thing is, you can tell that to anybody. You can say that to a 60-year-old.
See, so, and Bill, it's funny that you bring up economy, because Bill was one of the guys that was like, oh, we need to crash the economy so that we can get Trump out. Like he was one of those guys, right? And I don't know how he feels now that the economy is completely tanked. And he's like, oh, oof. Like, think I've gone and owned myself. Like, oh no, now I have to pay high gas prices.
Right. Well, I mean, it's not completely tanked in the sense that it's really like the Soviet Union when it collapsed. The corporations still stay, the gulag is still there, but they're owned by oligarchies now, right? And so when you set it up that there's a major sale coming and you can control the market and there's not a lot of people that can bid, I mean, things have fallen into this very, and just halved again the hands holding double the things. And so we're back to this point like it was in the 1890s, and it's funny, Republicans and communists, very closely related. You can find any article on the subject if you type in neoconservatives and Marxist origins and stories. The Trotskyites were a huge part of the Republican Party back in the 20s and 30s and 40s. And they were anti-Stalinites. The Democrats were Stalinites. It wasn't that they were against social services. Both sides had social services. Republicans had Social Security and the interest in social education. The Second Amendment arguably is a social education amendment because it's the only amendment that says that there's a well-regulated militia that should be in existence. That could be inferred that the government should be helping to create and educate citizens on how to defend themselves. The closest thing we have to that, besides the First Amendment, it would seem intuitive. But we don't look at it that way. We've decided to say, hey, Americans should fight against each other so that we continually take away the rights of one
divide
group.
and conquer.
It's brilliant because if you take away the rights of one group, then those rights are applied to everyone and extrapolate. Then each one of them can take away the rights of the woman, the rights of the white Christian male, the rights of the immigrant, and eventually those are, you can't just discriminate against your despotism. So there's this universalizing of loss of rights.
It's really fascinating stuff. But going back to kind of like your origins though, and like your background, are you like a single kid? Were you born in the US?
I had a brother, and I am born in the U.S. My dad's family are Croatian Americans, and my mom's family are like Spanish Californian. So like Ventura, California, there's a place called Camarillo, California. My great-great-grandfather was Don Adolfo Camarillo, and there's the Camarillo white horses. We have like a breed of horses. So I'm like a pretty far back Californian when Californians were also, ninth generations ago, Californians were conservative as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Californians were kind of conservative a few years ago when Arnold was hanging out over there.
Right. It's a weird word because conservative could just mean about the thing that you have. I'm trying to conserve what I have right now.
You're trying to conserve. Yes. Yeah, I understand. But your journey is really, really fascinating though, because you've been through like so much stuff and you've gone through so many things, especially like the part where you worked for CNN and you worked basically kind of like in the belly of the beast. That's what we're fighting against. Like this is what I'm fighting against is like the CNNs of the world and like the mainstream narrative. And that's what the show is about, like breaking the narrative. Now I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about your thoughts on recent things that having gone through the experiences that you have. For example, what are your thoughts on the Alex Jones trial, for example? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I just had on my show earlier. So if anyone after this, you want to see Rob Dew, who is the cameraman for Alex Jones and a friend who's worked with Alex Jones for years. He came on the show. We talked a little bit about the caps laws, which I'll bring up in a second. I'd also recommend, because I bring it up, to see his show on YouTube, The Grunions, which is a political puppet show. Grunions, like Grunyons, and there's a link in the last video that I did. But the reason, because he did a thing with the puppets on Trump's FBI raid about a month or two before the raid happened. So there's a number of expectations that could be said of what's going on in terms of what InfoWars is going through and what is happening connected to all of that. But
that's actually really fascinating because it all seems like it's kind of like,
well, right before the election, you had the January 6th, not the Million MAGA March and the impeachment, and the sequence of events that happened when they did so that it would sway the election. Similarly, we have this problem with the InfoWars trial. The InfoWars trial is before the election or before the again, removing abstractions, the things that people care about, people being defamed, people care about mothers and children in an abstract way, but being compensated for this idea of shutting up people questioning or just talking about the narrative as opposed to anything else. I mean, something that they hear about it 4 to 6 years later, something that had nothing to do with their names at all, never been mentioned. And out of 11 years or more than a decade is 90 minutes maybe of mentioning about the entire event whatsoever. So it's a pretty shady circumstance that was brought up because Hillary Clinton ran and was associating that Alex Jones had, for the first time ever, picked a candidate. And this is something that's missed, I think, by most of the left. Again, we're talking about the left and the right fighting each other versus the people versus the establishment. And, you know, Alex Jones always fought the left and the right, criticized them both, and eventually did the same with Trump once he became the thing, the beast itself, the actual establishment, and he was able to go back to criticizing him. But at first, he acknowledged that this guy was looked at not as new. He was looked at as new money. He was a caddy at the golf club that they like to go to. He happened to be the guy who owns it. Big deal. He was not respected, and he was appreciative in the early days of being invited to those kinds of parties because he was a loner in certain respects. Because of that, being a freak by having so much wealth, hanging out with inner cities, persons of color, when it was not acceptable for the people that were pretentious new money, that were trying to pretend that they were better than people. He had all kinds of issues all the way then. And they never looked at him like a real contender or equal, especially not an equal. So when Bill Clinton invited him to run against Hillary, you know, I think you can see that threat. And that's the thing, you know, I can't imagine, and I'm not accusing Bill of being more intelligent than he is or not being ignorant or something, but, you know, if I can't imagine it's possible to be that ignorant. How can someone be so naive as to not see right in front of them the obvious that uniformly you have the left and the right attacking a certain newcomer that is outside of the spheroid, right? And so Alex Jones falls into the same category. But I did want to say on the Alex Jones trial that it's very important, and I think people should look this up, is the Texas punitive damage cap, because there is a cap on punitive damages that would relate it to about $750,000, right? Because there've been runaway juries that have done things like this, and, you know, don't know what they're doing. So they've made rules to say, okay, it has to be 2x, no more than 3x or something like that. And there's a due process clause for punitive damages federally beyond Texas, which would limit it to anything below 4. So the fact that it's so exponentially high, just so exorbitantly high, it doesn't make sense high. They will not be able to actually enforce this unless, of course, we are living in the world that Trump and Alex Jones have been describing. Then we might see that could happen, right? But it's not legal.
It was fascinating to kind of, it was weird because I was a little bit out of it at the time, like when the trial was happening. So I wasn't watching the trial very closely, but I was just kind of like hearing about it from Viva Fry and, you know, Barnes and a lot of other YouTubers that were kind of covering it. Mind you, like, it's like, I'm kind of really glad that I'm on the know, because if you actually go and search for like the Alex Jones trial, you will not get anything other than mainstream results. And when the mainstream results come up, it's usually all, of course, like, you know, this dude was, you have to blame him for Sandy Hook. You know, he was the whole, just the incredible lies that they tell basically about Alex Jones. That's all it is. Like the first couple of pages of YouTube searches and stuff like that, it's all about that. And I always thought that it was really interesting with regards to Alex Jones, because that's kind of exactly what they did to him and his channel, like and to InfoWars and all that stuff.
Poetic justice. Yeah, there's a misinformation about an event that's being pushed out to the masses that everyone's accepting, and you will not find a single person who's not passionate on this side. Right. That's the way it is. As soon as you see that, what's that movie with Schwarzenegger where
True Lies,
where they have fake news, you know?
Oh,
and
yeah, I think it was True Lies, wasn't it? Or is it Eraser? I forget.
Someone has to help. Hold on. You can, it doesn't matter, but there's a movie, and whatever the title is, and it might have been those, and I might have just forgotten, but there's a movie where he they make a fake video of him as a terrorist in an airport, The Running Man. Thank you, Evan.
Okay, Running Man.
Running
Evan
Man.
S.
Very important movie. The Running Man is huge because he's trying to help the system, and then they Orwell him. They 1984, and a lady who tried to report him because she'd seen something bad about him later on sees that what the video they made of him is not real. They had him like killing a bunch of kids in a plane crash and some news story that was faked on the broadcast, and so she's like, this isn't real. And then they make a fake video about her doing some sort of an attack, and so there's this kind of growth narrative there. And so to say you can't question that when you have philosophy students that are told, no, teachers that are supposed to teach their children, their students, their university college students, that they're not to believe in truth because truth is an abstraction beyond postmodernism. I mean, the irony is just, when are we going to start to actually codify postmodernism into law?
Right. And it's funny that you brought up that movie because it made me think of another movie that was kind of similar. And that's Arlington Road. I don't know if you ever saw that, but that one's about like how this dude was basically like this like family man or whatever. And then they set it up for him to become like this terrorist. And it's like a plan to terrorist. It's really fucking good.
Wow.
Like that's a good movie.
I will.
Yeah, you should watch that movie. It's really good. But yeah, there's so much stuff that's going on that's like kind of like correlated. You got the Alex Jones trial, you got the Donald Trump FBI raid, and then like I was kind of laughing a little bit just because you got to see the comedy in these kind of things at the same time. Because if we don't laugh, we're gonna cry. But I thought it was a little bit funny that they were looking for WMDs in Trump's house because I was like, I mean, I'm very familiar with the Iraq War.
Stick with the familiar, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm like, what are we like? Is this like history repeating itself again? Because in this case, like they were like, we're gonna go and look for WMDs, and even though
Iraq is such a brutal one too. You're from Iran, right? That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like Iran's a bit more heavy than Iraq. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like Iraq has its Iraq and role, but it's still. It was kind of more secular at that point than Iran was. And we have all these crazy stories that say, this essentially Western country that has oil money, kind of Hugo Chavez style, he's got wood chippers that he's putting people feet first into, which, I believed up until like recently because someone said, no, that it's not true. I'm like, come on. I have a hard time as an American believing there is a dictator or a president out there that doesn't have a wood chipper, But no, I mean, okay. And so apparently they're like, yeah, apparently it was dismantled before they got there or moved around. It's like, oh, there's no evidence for this whatsoever. This is another wag the dog that we did so we could invade Iraq. And it becomes so simplified every time.
Dude, I don't think I heard the wood chipper thing before.
Oh, they told us all liberals in California. I'd imagine Canada had similar stories. They're like, no, how bad is he? He's so bad. He really moved from office,
Kind of like the whole Syria thing too with Assad. Is that his name? I'm kind of forgetting. The whole chemical weapons thing.
Yeah,
like he's killing his own people. That was all fucking it's all manufactured. Like that's the crazy part. George Molo is in the chat and he's handing out memberships like candy canes. Not the pervy way though. Thank you so much, George,
we love you, man.
We love you, George. And also I had a member message earlier from who was it? I think it was Thoughts on Fitness. I'm just gonna read this really quickly. No, it was Deranged Lunatic. Deranged Lunatic, thank you so much. Says everybody loves Nina.
There's an interesting thing. I'm sorry, I love you too.
No,
I got really excited by one of your other comments that didn't get paid for, but it was probably priceless in and of itself. Congo Red said Netanyahu was what got us into Iraq, which is compelling because Iraq and Germany and several countries that refused to be part of the strategic initiative to do the war on terror, which was an interesting. There's so many ambiguously amazing things. I love abstract. So a war on a country is really hard to do. A war on terror is more broad, right? But the idea that Netanyahu thought it was a useful thing for America to do this without Israel actually being involved, because if Israel did it, it would destabilize the Middle East. It would discredit Israel in the Middle Eastern sphere where it had been trying to maintain itself as, it's hard to say neutral. It wasn't Switzerland or something.
No,
they want to be kind of a geared power that can be respected without having to lose and exhaust themselves. And having a trading partner in Iraq was beneficial. So I don't know if it's true, but I love it. I love that idea.
A lot of people, let's just say a lot of people were involved with that. A lot of people that, I mean, to this day, I feel uncomfortable talking about. having read like so much of the stuff that I've read, I still want to have a YouTube channel, so I don't really want to go that crazy about it. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there's just a lot of people that are involved.
It's a hugely misunderstood thing, I
yes.
think I had an East German exchange student who moved from California, and they said, hey, when you get there, they're going to ask you if you have running water in Berlin. Like, Americans don't know what it's like, and they just assume everywhere is Iraq. But Iraq isn't even Iraq. Iraq is actually a place with secularism and cinema.
yeah. Well, I mean, the United States kind of destroyed it.
They took away the secularism and cinema.
Yes, they destroyed all of it, and it was horrific. But one of the things that, speaking of being secular and things happening again and secret history and all that kind of stuff, I find the whole Russia and Ukraine situation very familiar as well. Because let me ask you this first. What do you think is going on over there? Do you think Russia is just crazy?
Well, I mean, as a guy who talks about Tartaria a lot, and had an interview with Alexander Dugin, who is Dugin's the Rasputin of Russia, right? Like, he's when they say weird guy, they're talking about him. Like, he's supposed to be this, he's Putin's right hand, Discordian, chaos magician and sorcerer and political science teacher. But he had talked about Turan and Tartaria and these connections to this idea that history has been lied about, right? And this is another thing I think the West doesn't really grasp. Some of your audience, your husband knows about this idea of Fomenko timeline. The lunar calendar, the Islamic lunar calendar, and the Jewish calendar, right? They're 19-year cycle calendars. Mm-hmm. When they tried to figure out how to align the Russian calendar, which is a whole other calendar, it was so complicated, and they couldn't get it done into the 20s of the 20th century, 20s and 30s. And they're like, this doesn't make any sense. Why can't we make our calendar align with these? Well, we can do it with the Arab calendar, but we can't do it with the Gregorian calendar. It's just broken. Well, how? Well, these kings and their birthdays and death days, 12 in a row, are the same as these kings with their birthdays and death days, 12. It's actually the same actual piece of history repeated, being used. And why does that happen? Who would do this? What were they just trying to mess with history? Well, it looks like the Catholic Church went into this area and they tried to convert this group of people, and they figured the best way was to rewrite their history and put the names of their with their gods, and so it just repeated itself. That can't be that common, right? That can't be that big of a thing. What? Well, apparently, if you start finding it, there's example after example after example, and you go to like the Catholic Church's pseudo-Isidorian decrees, right? And the pseudo-Isidorian decrees are the ones where they're these priests with their wives and their sons and their daughters, and then these Catholics show up that are associated with the Ignatian school of thought that becomes the Jesuits, and says, "Hey, check out this coffee-stained piece of paper that we just made." Well, it's actually an ancient document from 1,000 years ago. It's not a hoax at all. No, it's real. We swear. We swear to God. But what does it say? Oh, it says that you can't get married and you can't have kids. Oh, it says you could never have done that 1,000 years ago. So they just completely would conquer a group at time after time after time. And then you have this tradition of calling the fathers of all of these altar boys in these new liberation theology states the foundlings. You call the fathers of the foundlings, right? So this continues to grow. But Russia has this history kind of figured out at this point, because this guy called Anatoly Fomenko. And what he says is, hey, basically Jesus was 1,000 years ago, not 2,000 years ago, which, that sounds weird, but you got to imagine how much weirder it would have been then, right? Because 1,000 years versus 2,000 years, it's still thousands. But if it's 100 years versus 1,900 or 1,100 years, that's a crazy difference. If it's like 3 generations ago, my grandpa knew Jesus, and all of a sudden it's like, well, 1,000 years ago in the caveman times. No, I mean, 1,000 years ago is the Crusades. So we've got Jesus horseback in Syria, Damascus, going to Constantinople, which is called Nova Jerusalem or Jerusalem. So Jerusalem at the time. And everything we understand about history has been moved because you have nomadic groups, right? And this is Cecil Rhodes saying this, not even me, or Quigley, talking about a difference between a state and a nation. A nation's migratory, nation of Islam, nation of MTV, sure. but a state is a resource-bound economy, right? And it can be a location, it can be defined by resources, but Weber would go further in the 1800s and say a state is the legitimate source of violence. So you've got people that will trade, and then they're incurring taxes generationally, which you can be forced to pay. But those loans, if you had a loan your lifetime, it's bankrupt, it's gone. A state loan can never really bankrupt the state unless you completely start the state over. And then they have even discredited themselves from being bankrupted as a state. So they're able to take a huge loan and then generationally continue to force the citizens of that state to pay it. And that's the infrastructural plan. But that wasn't the way it always was. And it looks like Russia is one of the first countries to pick up on that. There was a huge movement in Turkey called pseudo-Turkology in the 19th century. But they didn't call themselves that either. Again, Americans and Europeans call it pseudo-Turkology. They were calling themselves Tartarists, studying the Tartar.
Interesting.
So Ukraine has Kyiv. Kyiv was part of Poland. There's a book called Taurus Bulba, and it's all about this period when Polish city controlled Ukraine at the time had been stolen from the Cossacks, and the Cossacks are the Tartars. And Taurus Bulba has to cut his hairlock, have his children raised by Poles, God forbid, so that they can, from the inside out, destroy this infrastructural civilization and return things back to the way things were when Kyiv was part of Tartary, right? Part of the Cossack Empire. And this is the legacy. We hear this in Russia, and it's interesting because Russia, again, America thinks that they descend from London or from Athens or from Rome. You know, we have our extraneous abstract notions of where we come from. The same thing with the Russians, because Moscow is a new city, very new. Even Napoleon's version of wooden Moscow is new. Kyiv is their big play because Kyiv is where they think, you know, the Polish kings and the Tartar kings really had, you know, so they want Kyiv strategically and ideologically. It's not that they don't. And there is also this confusion about Russians because there are a lot of them, and they're not all, shocker here, they're not all into their president. Not every single Russian is a huge Putin patriot. And even the ones who are, you know, like they see Ukraine as being, what's up, George?
Really, really quick a second. George, thank you so much for the membership, and your super chat says, all hail Infinite Lady of Light and all hail Brother Andreas. Now that's a red shirt, tie, red pilling, hail. Oh my God. And then he gifted 5 more memberships, and then he's saying that he just got out of surgery.
Dude, that's right. Dude, everybody pray for George. That's right. He just finished the surgery.
I didn't even know. So
I was super stoked because he told me he was healthy and safe after it and he's gonna rest. And I was like, that's what you got to be doing.
I'm so glad you're okay, George. Speedy recovery, man. And thank you so much for being here. I'm sorry I interrupted you. I was so fascinated.
No, dude. I love George too. So it's huge, man. George is like every Monday, Base Day F, man. So with Adam Krigler, you guys have to watch George. He's great
show. Yeah, everybody, Adam Krigler's channel. George
the Giant Slayer's channel. He does amazing videos, right?
Oh yes, of course. Everybody's got to check that out. But George does stuff with me all the time on Sundays. We hang out all the time, so it's all good. But this is your show tonight. By the way, Circe's channel's in the description, Twitter's in the description. Everybody want to subscribe to this guy. I'm telling you, he is. He's
Dude, I should make you my manager agent. You get 10%. That was great. I like that. 10% of all subs. That's good.
Oh, okay. So. But man, you're going far back because like this is really interesting stuff. So you're saying like
Slavs hold a grudge. It's not like
well, so do Persians. So
right, we're thinking about Turks still. Everybody's thinking.
But so you're saying that they have, if I'm following you correctly, you're saying they have a claim to this area, like
they believe they have a claim.
They believe they have a claim.
They believe that they are the offspring and not the founder, right? So they're finding the found, but they're not the actual creator of Tartaria. You know, and Tartaria is Turan, and Turan would have included Iraq and Iran and Persia. The known world. In fact, if you take the time to translate the word Tartaria into Cyrillic on Google Translate and then put it into, and I've got it on my last episode, so you can check it out. Go to their Wikipedia, the Russian Wikipedia on Tartaria. It's very clear what they believe about the world and about Russia and about its place in history and about lost history and about agreed contemporary reality. And so Dugan, when he came on my show, talked, and it was interesting because a guy who loves Putin and works for Putin was not like without criticism of Putin, which is interesting. To the West in English, openly talking about issues with the intervening of Russia. Now they can point to propaganda, and he says unilaterally it was propaganda on both sides. The things that they said that all Ukrainians were terrible, that all Russians were terrible, is unilateral propaganda. I mean, I know a lot of wonderful Russians and a lot of wonderful Ukrainians, but I also know that there are people in every country that can be crazy. The Azov Battalion exists. It wasn't perfect, to say the least. And Russia does terrible things sometimes too. Like it'd be crazy to say
every nation does.
They don't. But it is interesting because I've got videos with Ivory Hecker, and you can see the what was it, the Georgian or the Kazakhstan? It was the Kazakhstan embassy for the United States videos with, you can only find it in Russian or in Cyrillic or in the Grigori script. You can't find it in English, but it's not all English video with the subtitles aimed so that you couldn't find it, right? They don't want the West to look for this. But if you're in that country, you can see all about how the West has biolabs. It's just a unilateral fact. They're happy to tell you about it, that the Soviets had them, that they took them over, that they built new ones in order to do these safeguard protections against what could happen. How about everyone that they said, we have to hire? In California, you've got this place called San Bruno, where they hired all the cosmonauts, all the Soviet scientists, because as many as they could, because they said if we don't, then they're going to be hired by Iran or by Iraq, right?
Yeah, and for our enemies.
For Project Babylon, right? So yeah, which is how they got Gerard Bull, right, who is a Canadian scientist who worked on the Project Babylon for Saddam Hussein, and is a very fascinating character, right? So they figure, hey, we need to control these groups. We have to have biolabs. We need to make sure that if they're still working on their biolabs, it's all this excuse stuff. It's the same with cloning. You've heard the super soldiers, China and France say, yeah, okay, we admit it. They're like, what? Yeah, okay, we admit it. What do you admit? We have super soldier clone islands. What? Yep. Yeah, well, okay, because they do, and you guys do, and of course, we're gonna have to
do it too.
Yeah. This is how consumers start to hear about these things. It's generations after it's happened. 20 years ago, it had to have been that they were starting these super soldier islands and things. So we're living in a very post world. And Dugin's talked about it as what is the real ideology? You've got this idea of Atlanticism.
The what ideology?
What is this ideology?
Oh, what is this? Okay.
What is this ideology? You've got a dynamic between unipolar and multipolar world. This idea that there's a bipolar world or there's a or there's a quadrupolar world, whatever it is, having multiple poles is a big push by the Russians. They don't want to see, and this has been their argument, and I think it's a valid one, that they've been encroached upon by what is perceivably a homogenized fascistic collective, which is the West. And you can say it however you want to say it. We can come up with more collective terms that represent shared goals and values, but I feel like Hitler would have said that too. So you have to kind of acknowledge that there is kind of a Starship Troopers ideology here, that we will force people to believe these values are important, that progressing towards a direction is in every direction, and to believe that this is the direction to progress, and calculating how far have these third world and fourth world countries progressed towards our goal, that's a dangerous thing. And so Russia's really pushed against that just ideologically.
And especially like recently too, Putin has been saying a lot of different things. Like, he's been talking about fighting the woke, and he's happy with the results of what's happened with regards to the sanctions and all this stuff, because he wants to be cut off from the West. Like, he doesn't want to be part of this society or this whatever they've got to offer. He wants to do the opposite. But what I find the most fascinating out of what's going on in terms of what's going on in the US and the reception of what's happening in Russia and Ukraine is the fact that there's so much outrage. And I feel like the outrage that came out from it was almost as if everyone's
they've been waiting
Ukrainian, everyone's Ukrainian all of a sudden.
They've been waiting to be upset about Russia since last time they were upset about Russia.
Right?
There were these emails, and now it's this. It's never going to stop.
But it was really interesting to me because, I kind of feel like, again, there's parallels to draw from the U.S. War with Iraq and Afghanistan, because at the time, the U.S. was like, we're gonna blame the war on terror, and us and a whole bunch of Western countries are going to go to the Middle East, and we're going to go and we're on behalf of the war on terror, on behalf of saving the world, we're going to go in, we're going to do all this stuff. And now I feel like, Russia is kind of claiming the same thing, and they're kind of going into that. But everyone was for the US and you know, the Western countries doing that. Whereas in this time, it's like, well, you know, and the US and everybody else was going like halfway across the world to do this. Whereas in, you know, Ukraine is literally like on the border of Russia. So what is like the biggest difference here? You know, why is why is there so much outrage?
I think they're really different in a lot of ways. There's some similarities. The first thing is like, you see that I just watched that movie Vice with Christian Bale, where he thanked the devil for winning an award, right? But it's about him. You thank the devil for winning the award at the Academy Awards because he won it for playing Dick Cheney so well. And I think not a lot of the right are going to watch this movie because they're not interested in kind of a, you know, a look at down memory lane at the neo-Marxist, neoconservatives. Because I want to kind of emphasize that connection again, the Trotskyites to the neoconservatives, because what they did was they took over and created a feudal system that they control the resources to, and then they would divvy out as little as possible, right? And we can't even call it neo-feudalism, it's just feudalism. And I don't want to stress the oil thing because there's a lot more going on, but jobs, Halliburton, and things that were connected to the fact, I think the thing about oil that was really important was that it was a money maker for Saddam Hussein to pay his people stipends and to build up society. Because I guess, again, and how many Americans and Canadians do a thought experiment when you close your eyes and you think about Russia or you think about Iraq? Do you see 1984 or do you see Russia? Do you see Agrabah? Do you see like the beautiful buildings and the cathedrals and the mosques and the people's faces? Because you don't. You see potatoes and you see starving people. It's the image that's been infected with you from CNN and Fox from 1988, and it's still.
I don't have to look that far, man, because I look at that in Mexico. I live here, right? And that's the kind of picture that they paint about here all the time. Like, this is a war-torn country, and I mean by war-torn, I mean like, you know, drug cartels are basically running this country, and you know, everyone's getting beheaded every 5 minutes, and like, you know, I mean, I get people in the chat all the time just being like, well, how could you live in Mexico? People get human trafficked all the time, and I'm like
at least you don't live in California.
Human trafficked in the fucking US? Like, I don't.
California is like, as a ninth generation California is North Korea to Mexico, right? And Baja California, we're just separated. It's another example of taking a nation and a state and dividing it and conquering it. And if you look at California's old maps, it didn't used to look like an owl. It used to actually have Nevada and be a lot bigger. And they're like, well, let's just make sure that we take away the resources so that they're stuck and that we can kind of control them unforeseeably into the future. But Mexico, and it's great to hear, you know, from the pharmaceutical agencies that Mexico's run by drug launderers and lobby. That's amazing. Because that's the thing. Everybody is all about calling people what they are, because it's the thing they see the clearest, but they can't see themselves on themselves. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, just, it's important to remember this as an American. Anytime you travel, people are terrified of you because they think you have a gun, and that you are far more frightening than whatever the CNN made you think about that country. No matter where I've been in the world, it's always safer than LA or where I'm from. You know,
and I've been guilty of it too. Like, before I moved here, I was very much influenced by what was said about Mexico.
I still do it. I'll get off a train in Peru and I'll be like, oh, this might be a dangerous. Oh gosh.
Right. It's like, oh, you're like, oh no. But at the same time, it's like, okay, yeah. It's all good. I mean, it's crazy to me because, like, especially with regards to like Mexico, you know, I hear people like Savannah Hernandez. By the way, shout out to her. I really respect her and what she does. But you know how she goes to like the border, and she's done a couple of documentaries there and stuff like that. But like, I often find it interesting because she never kind of, or like the right or whoever never really touches upon the fact that the US is heavily involved in the drug trafficking of US, or I mean, in Mexico, and how, you know, you have like places like Blackwater and
it's an untenable thing for both the left and the right to talk about for really similar reasons. The right can't talk about it because the CIA is involved. The left can't talk about it because the CIA and the corporations that they built up that are controlling the NGOs are involved. And, you know, really, you know, it's not about any specific people, but there are families that have been in the pharmaceutical trade since they were in the opium trade to China and are still lobbying with money that they've accumulated. So that's hard for the elite to talk about because, hey, you know, especially conservatives that want to conserve some of their own wealth, they have to recognize there are some rich people out there that are making hell. And it's a question I often wonder about. How would Facebook and Microsoft and Google exist in a world with even less checks and balances, because we'd love to see it, right? We're always talking about this anarchy, but the anarchy, it's ironic. The Republicans are all ancoms. They don't know it, but they're ancommunists. They want to have a system that's at a level and it's limited, because they don't want ANCAPs out there, because in ANCAPs how you get mafia and Vegas and state, and how states start in the first place, how a state can decide they have a legitimate source of violence. So
it's funny. It's funny that you bring up the mob in Vegas, because my friend Gary is in Vegas right now. Gary from Nerdrotic.
Nice.
Yeah. And he always he makes fun, because he says when the mob ran Vegas,
it was better.
It was better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, now that the state runs it's more bureaucratic. But the irony is, what do they do to it? Now it's a family place, right? So you take the family to Burning Man. This is the way it goes. And I was thinking about this earlier also, this idea that the state used to represent a certain amount of bureaucracy, which was amount of entropy, in my opinion. As a conservative, I used to think of, hey, if you do that, it's going to screw it up. You give money to the state, to the schools, as opposed to directly to the students to actually get themselves educated. Obviously, it's going to get lost before it gets to the kids. That's reality, Sure. But the same thing can be said the other way around, where we're creating a system that perpetuates the loss of education in order to entrap us in that system. And beyond that, the things that they're recommending for us to do are going faster, because bureaucracy is no longer the hampering of the system, the entropy in the system's corruption. The system itself wasn't always, it's not a great system, but it was built by some decent people. The system's not the corruption. It's the people that are corrupt. Newsflash, shocker. Sorry. If you take out the 30 or 40% of the people that are taking the money through the system and it's automated, it does become a lot more efficient. And you've seen this with Google, what it's done to bureaucracy in Africa and in Washington, D.C. There's just less room for human error or human sin. But that's also meant a certain amount of automation is replacing entropy, and things are going faster, because the system can very effectively make certain things happen now. And things that used to be, we were talking about abortion at one point, that, I still think for the even though I'm obviously more pro-life, I still fundamentally think that there should be case by case circumstances, just in case something really is crazy or whatever the situation. I don't think that's a thing that should be beyond discussion. I get it should
always be. That's how I think too. It should always be an individual, case by case basis, based on
because it's too complicated to say we got to do it to everybody or not. Yep. And when you say it generally, it can be done to everybody. This is what the law does. Equal rights and protections can translate into equal conditions and ritual. And it can be, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it more and more, that it becomes automated as opposed to another. It should be part of
more
societal.
Human, right? Yeah.
You want the pursuit of happiness to exist, and it's going to be more and more interesting, especially as antinatalism develops, because people having kids taken out of the womb and put into incubators to be raised will become more and more plausible. And so it'll become actually a choice. You won't have to kill the kid if you do that.
Isn't that kind of like the transhumanism thing?
Oh, yeah. So that's another thing. The Republicans are more transhumanists than they'd like to admit. The Democrats are far more transgender. But it's ironic, because transgender is a right-wing ideology, because it's the idea of conforming the self to fit the social understanding of what a woman is, the construct. But the individual is with the conservatives, they're saying, hey, well, these kinds of norms can be broken down. We're going to allow for Ayn Randiest transhumanist longevity research. So, I just think everything's backwards. It's hilarious.
Isn't it so crazy, man? It's that's why we always talk about how they're two sides of the same coin, because it's really they have so many similarities, but they're also opposites. And it's just very fascinating. But I'm going to change gears for a minute here to something that happened recently, actually pretty much today. This came out today talking about Anne Heche and her car accident. I don't know if you heard or not, but
I've been deeply go ahead.
Have you been following this? Because this
I don't follow pop stars, but I do follow MK Ultra, and this one was a great.
Okay, so you know where I'm going with this then, because Anne Heche's official cause of death was revealed today, and the cause of death was obviously an accident, and they're saying that she was under the influence of cocaine. And it was funny to me though, because at the same time as this kind of dropped, there was others like whispers going on. So I'm gonna set this up, and then I'm gonna get your thoughts on this. But I saw things going around like this headline here from Daily Beast saying certified bozos on TikTok claim Anne Heche was murdered over acting roles. And other headlines,
the Girl 13 movie about human trafficking, right? Yeah.
Yes, and another movie as well. Like there was this one here from PolitiFact
Toxic
saying
Skies or whatever. Oh yeah.
Toxic Skies.
This movie. So Toxic Skies is the old movie. She was about to release a movie on human trafficking now. That is Girl 13 or Girl in Room 13 or something like that.
Yes.
Right. Which is like, there's already a movie about 13-year-old girls doing that to themselves called 13. But
that's on Netflix. This one here, I found really interesting because it was like Anne Heche was murdered by the Illuminati because she was working on a movie about Jeffrey Epstein. Like this is like some Instagram post, and this person's like, no, Anne Heche wasn't murdered because she was working on a movie.
They frame the question as so that it's not what the actual question is. I've noticed that I've never gotten to a fact check thing that's accurate to the post ever yet.
Never. And it's so funny though that the way that they said it too, it's like meaning how much research could you have possibly done to know whether this is true or not? Like there's no way that you could tell by now.
Well, there is a movie she was working on about human traffickers. And it wasn't, and so just today, or was it yesterday? I don't know how fast the world moves anymore, right? It's literally spinning faster.
So fast.
But they say that the 80 to 1,000 people were arrested in a human trafficking bust recently in the last 2 days. So in terms of these, human trafficking is organized. It is not this sort of like, and we have these cool movies where there's like a crazy Tom Arnold in a van, but no. If there's a Tom Arnold in a van, it's because he's working for the bigger system, right? It's never going to be, and that's why that movie would have connected to Epstein and how important Epstein is, because he wasn't just human trafficking. He was exploiting the same system the elite have built, where $1 is worth less than a peso in 1988. And so they've made it so that you can buy a teenage girl for $150. That's what they've done. And he was doing it too, right?
Yeah. And I mean, this stuff is fascinating to me because
I'm glad you got this article. This is the messed up one. Sorry.
Oh no. I hadn't seen this one. I'm glad that you posted this in the back. I hadn't even seen this one.
Here, say what you're gonna say first, because I gotta tear up this article after you.
Please do. Okay, we're gonna talk about this then. So I just think that it's really interesting because, well, first of all, let me ask you something else. Do you remember this other guy? Because this situation made me remember this other dude, Michael Hastings.
Oh yeah, Hastings. Yep.
Who also died in a car accident mysteriously.
That's why I don't drive an electric car anymore. I traded my electric car in and got back to my Honda Element stick shift.
And that was my question for you. Do you think that
I could take over any car? If that was your question.
That was my question, because I know that you've mentioned on the Chrissy Mayer podcast, which I listened to, by the way, that you're a hacker and that
hackers are really, it sounds so weird, but what a hacker does is he just messes with code. It's just literally like changing things. So, I mean, I'm not like an evil black hat hacker is the term they use for people that are like trying to do malice or something like that. But I'm pretty damn gray hat. I'm pretty familiar with code. I will hit up a company and be like, you have an exploit, and I will show you how to fix it. And you should pay me, because that's a good way to get by, actually, is try to like fix these exploits.
I mean, I've seen those kind of people in movies before, but I never really thought that they existed.
It's easy. You just have to not use Windows or Mac. You download Kali Linux and you just start going, right?
I get you.
But there are tools out there. You can watch the DEF CON videos and everything. There are videos on YouTube that'll teach you how to hack any car, because they're all automated systems, and they'll take.
And that's Linux, the crazy part, right? Like, I think, like, do you think that her car was hacked or something crazy went down? Otherwise,
checking out. Good question. Checking out this article, first thing that you see, and I loved this. The way it was presented to me is just this, because the way it's written is the most important part, right? And this is, you remember everyone talked about the Watergate scandal. During the Watergate scandal, there's a thing called the Church Committee hearings, and they had people. The Watergate scandal just hides what's really going on with the Church Committee. You have these people wearing Mission Impossible masks, and they have voice changers. And they're talking about the CIA is doing all this MK Ultra research, and how Tavistock exists, and how they write papers, have them sent to the president so the president can say, oh, well, Washington Post said today, but it was something that Dick Cheney wrote, right? So this is all known. But I love this article. It says, why did Anne Heche buy a, quote, random red wig in this Venice hair salon before her crash? And going in deeper, more quotes, he says, she was acting like a, quote, sweet little girl. Okay, so if you know anything about MK Ultra, wigs, red, pink wigs, huge sign. It's one of the MK Ultra signs. The other thing, when
I didn't know that. Is that why they all look the same now? Because of the whole, because I was wondering about this whole red and blue wig, this situation. I've been wondering about that for a while, actually, like why they're all like, they look the same and they're always wearing kind of like the same.
There's also, they also do forward, backward name palindromes and things. So Anna, you know, she was going by Anna by some of the people that are her handlers were referred to as Anna because Anna's forwards and backwards, little things like that instead of Annie, you know. But
yeah,
then she's supposed to be on all these drugs and she's completely out of craze. And you saw the video of her, and it could have, did you, right? When she's getting in the ambulance and she jumps up like she's in the burbs, which could easily be because, you know, adrenaline, getting an epinephrine shot, having new oxygen, you know, it could have been a lot of things, but it just, you know, I can't not say that it reminded me of that scene in The Burbs with Tom Hanks and everything, where the guy's strapped down in the ambulance and he's told, no, the neighborhood's safe, everything's fine. But then inside the ambulance, there's the scary doctor guy, right? So there's that. And then her connections to Ellen DeGeneres, who dated, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. She's really good friends with Mary Cheney, Dick Cheney's daughter, who's a lesbian, and I think she might be even married now. So I don't know the whole story with that. I just know that they are very friends. Connected. It's another connection to Bush. One of the reasons why Bush was on the show, right? Of course. Well, you know, I mean, and people. This is the other thing. The LGBT movement that's breaking up right now is because of Mary Cheney and Liz Cheney, because they know that they've progressed the issue of gay marriage far enough now that the conservatives will say, okay, yeah, fine. What? Gay marriage? We don't care. It's 20 years ago. We just don't want you to do this kid thing, you know. So they've moved the goalpost with it, and they can easily get the gay marriage thing now, so long as they separate it from the trans issue, which really, again, will be a more Republican issue as transhumanism replaces gender.
That's so crazy. Well, okay. Have you read this whole thing? Should we read it together? Because I haven't read this one.
Go right ahead. Go, you read it. You sound
so
better.
It says right before Anne Heche crashed her car into a Mar Vista home at a little before 11 a.m. Friday.
11's a big conspiracy number also.
I know the one. That's true. One. Friday, she was all, unless it's like 33 too. Oh God. Well, what if it was like,
I had two guys talking about numbers all day for an episode, and I get it. Numbers can be crazy. But there are these little ones too, where you have to be like, okay, you know, they put it in the article. Maybe it wasn't destiny, but the fact that this article is as weirdly written as it is, there's a reason why these are the few words that are in it.
Okay. Friday, she was acting like a sweet little girl as she bought a bright red wig at Glass Hair Design in Venice salon owner Richard Glassett on Monday. So I guess this is the owner. There's the wig.
Right. And it's very synthetic, you know, pinkish red. It's a very, you know, it's the MK Ultra brand. If you look up MK Ultra red wig, you'll see all these examples, right?
What? Like, dude, that's a thing?
Katy Perry, Miley Cyrus, Mila Jovovich, just, you know, anybody. Hannah Montana, my God, it's never going to stop, you know?
Oh my God. I didn't even know that was a thing. You're right. Like Lady Gaga, and then there's like, other people. There's so
and when
many.
You start finding out the people that get him to do it too, because he's like, okay, well, hey, you know, Mila Jovovich wearing a wig, you know, she's a model, right? Who cares? Well, who was her husband? Who was this MK Ultra handler guy who was making pedophile movies before and after? And they've been, you know, when you start to look into these connections to the people that are actually working around them, you know, like if Brian Warner, who goes by Marilyn Manson, he's a very high-ranking Freemason, and you've seen his ring. I hope he's constantly wearing a Masonic ring. I mean, there's a hand in a pocket here. And so there's this beautiful thing where they get to reveal, and maybe they even have to, but I think you get a little bit of extra credit when you do it in such a way that it's right in front of people so that people who know can read it. But for instance, this could be fed through an algorithm system, and it's going to pick up red wig, sweet little girl. It'll go into a little neat pile of things that are related to this, and that's
it reminds me of the Pizzagate thing. That's really interesting. Okay.
Well, Pizzagate's another, and I just really quickly wanted to comment on that, is that people, I think and I want to say this mainly to the left, they misunderstand how valuable a meme like Pizzagate can be, because the fact is, regardless of the icon of the image macro and all of the extenuating circumstances and everything else, the fact that it brought relevance to human trafficking in America the way it did was relevant. And the response to say, hey, this specific, the way the fact checkers do it. No, Jeffrey Epstein's not what the Anne Heche movie's about. This has nothing to do with the more generality of the issue, which is that it's not just priests, it's not just celebrities, it's not just any protected group of intelligentsia, it's the entire idea. And that they are, in fact, in circumstances hurting kids, and kids are being hurt. And we just, the fact that the conservatives in the 80s were the ones to delegate the satanic panic and say, no, it's not that their kids are being raped. It's soda pop and rock music. That was when we call Republicans square. Now the liberals are doing it. They're saying, oh, no. These kids are making it up. These parents are making it up. It's not real. Let's just go back to sleep.
Let's just stick our head in the sand. About an hour after the crash into the house, nearly 60 firefighters rescued Heche from the wreckage of her small blue car in Mar Vista, a neighborhood on LA's website, just 2 miles from the salon. They also extinguished flames that enveloped the vehicle and left the house uninhabitable. Videos taken before the crash show Heche speeding in the neighborhood, slamming into an apartment building's garage, narrowly missing a pedestrian and hitting a Jaguar before winding up at the house in the 1700 block of South Walgrove Avenue. Heche was in critical condition Monday on a ventilator and in a coma after suffering serious burns because of the crash. Her representative told the Times in a statement, the burns require surgical intervention, the statement said, and the actor has a significant pulmonary injury. Heche is now under investigation by the LAPD, and the authorities have obtained a search warrant for the actor's blood drawn. And I guess that's already happened. So that was, that she was on cocaine. However, according to the celebrity hair and makeup artist Glass, Heche wasn't speaking cursive when she stopped at a salon around 10:35 a.m. Friday, according to a timestamp on several photos he took with the actor after ringing up her purchase. Why is he saying this? I don't understand.
Well, okay, so I think it's like, first off, there's the expression, they weren't speaking clearly, and so they're saying they're slurring their words. But he wasn't speaking cursive. It wasn't very clear. It wasn't neatly said, or maybe it was broken up into pieces, a bit jarring or something like that. It could be that. But it also is that there's a lack of connectivity, perhaps. So who's to say? Who's to say how much Glass knows? He might not know what's going on, but a guy who runs a wig shop in LA might know a lot more than people realize, on the other hand. I mean, it's easy to assume that people don't know anything. It's easy to assume everybody doesn't know everything. But, who's to say he doesn't? I wanted also, because someone had mentioned, what about Ezra Miller? And I just sent you a picture of Ezra Miller wearing a blonde wig, because it's even bigger for men to wear blonde wigs than necessarily pink wigs, even though
I was going to bring Ezra up after. So that's funny, because people.
Oh, yeah. No, he's America's love child. He's the American dream. It's like an experiment just to see how far it'll go, I guess. I don't know.
Isn't it mental? We'll talk about it after this. Speaking in cursive is how Glass described a person who is under the influence, be it alcohol or drugs. Heche did not appear altered to him, he said in an exclusive interview with the Times on Monday.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
So it didn't seem slurring at all. So that's even more clear. They're saying that they were fine, right?
So,
and have you seen the DoorDash video of the car crashing into the house at full speed, like there's no brakes?
I didn't see that, but that's what I heard. I heard that it was so fast, like there was no brakes, and I was like, that was the first thing that came to my mind, was like, what, did somebody cut our brakes? Because it just seems like
they could have. But have you seen? I mean, or they might not have needed to. Have you seen The Men Who Stare at Goats? Right, and you're familiar with the idea that there were soldiers who recently, as of I think 2006 to 2017, even more examples, who they were committed suicide, and then their families were told it's a tragedy, because their family wouldn't get a proper military funeral, all this horrible stuff. But that their family, why would this happen? Well, they took psychedelics. What? Oh, well, they were given psychedelics, and then they ran through a window. which was bulletproof, because they've been mind control experimented on and they can run through bulletproof glass. So there's these programming levels such as omega and theta and gamma and beta, and right. And there's a certain delta to omega program. One of them just makes you completely lose yourself in public, Miley Cyrus on stage as a child kind of a thing.
This is kind of like the Manchurian Candidate stuff, right?
Absolutely. That same kind of it. And the thing is, it goes back further to the 39 steps, but there's a number of these ideas that if you trauma, and you can watch if you go to Odyssey and type MK Ultra, I have like a 3-hour at least documentary on MK Ultra, church committee hearings, etc., with a lot of testimonies of girls who were military brats who'd been tortured by psychiatrists, military psychiatrists from Germany or raised in the United States studying MK Ultra from the Germans, that would say, hey, you know what we can do? It's really easily to prove. We torture someone until they we give them a traumatic experience, which is so brutal that they shut off. They just cannot process it. And maybe someday they'll try to process it later, right? That's where your mind goes. And you do that in certain ways with drugs, electricity, with torture, with shock. And I think we miss out on how powerful shock is with the media, but it will create schizophrenic separations in the mind, allowing for multiple personalities. It's a lot simpler than people realize. If you speak 2 languages, you have 2 personalities because you're thinking in 2 different ways. You have a code switch for your parents. You have a code switch. Code switching is what anthropologists call it. So we do that. We do that all the time. We just aren't really recognizing it.
And it's weird too, because like some of the stuff you're saying like really kind of goes hand in hand with what's going on with COVID too, because that was like the whole mass hysteria thing and the mass psychosis and how they essentially MK Ultra'd the world. Like they were like,
MK Chatter and MK Often is the program where it's a harp and you start with laugh tracks, and then once you uniform people's reactions, then you're able to take away the laugh track because you actually can control the actual emotions and the reactions.
And the cues. That's really interesting stuff. So apparently, according to this dude, she wasn't under the influence and
not at all.
Not at all. The daytime Emmy winner was very pleasant, Glass said, when she popped into his Main Street salon, though through the back door, wearing a strappy top, comfy pants, and fluffy plush house shoes. When he first caught her out of the corner of his eye walking into the shop by herself from the parking lot, Glass said he thought she was one of his clients, Orange is the New Black actor Lori Petty. That's funny.
Interesting. Also, considering Lori Petty's familial history, her family, she was, the things she went through. She's into
like a Scientologist, right?
I mean,
wait, am I thinking of the other one? No, I'm thinking about the wrong person. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if Lori Petty is, but I know that she is a victim of prostitution by her father-in-law, and her mother and her sisters were, and that she eventually escaped.
God, really? I did not know that about Lori Petty.
Right, yeah, and to detain her.
That's crazy, dude. Some of the shit.
So interesting connection to connect that. I mean, it's a stupid sync, but it's kind of funny that he thought it was her.
That's what conspiracy theories are fun, right? Because you're like, there's all these like, little coincidences, and then you're like, well, is it a coincidence? What is
Carl? We had David played on my show from MK Ultrasound, and he said, Carl Jung has a book called Symbology and Acausal Symbology because it's acausal. We're not sure about causality all the time, and this is why AI is so useful, because it can analyze all this data and make and infer patterns that we might not pick up on, right? And so they're there, but we don't know if they're connected or why.
Very interesting. Heche immediately eyed some wigs arranged on the shelf over his shampoo area in colors ranging from natural shades to shocking pink and solid white, and asked about a blue one. When Glass said that that one was spoken for, Heche said that she would buy a bright red wig instead. The salon owner said he told Heche that the red wig hadn't been cut or styled or even washed yet, but that the 53-year-old didn't care. By the time that he went to ring her up, he had recognized who she was, and then they proceeded to take a number of selfies together. He posted one showing the two of them and the wig on his Instagram account. So I met Heche today, and she purchased a red wig. So random. Glass captioned the selfie for his 3,000 followers. I love Venice Beach. Can you imagine this dude's life right now? He's like, wait, what? Like literally, like after she left my store, like this whole fucking thing happened. That's crazy.
So random. Hashtag.
So random. Oh my god. In a photo, Heche was wearing the no makeup and her hair is a bit rumpled as she smiles for camera. The 6 days, 7 nights actor grabbed my face and cuddled it, said Glass, a Venice native, and she asked him if they could work together, if they had worked together before. Glass told her no, but she said he was definitely available in the future. In one of the images TMZ posted, you can see that the wig on the console, the stylist said, and indeed the photo that many believe allegedly shows a bottle of alcohol in the car's cup holder, also shows a bit of red fringe where the wig sits on the passenger side of the entered console. It would be nice if MSN had posted the photo. Okay, there's a hyperlink so we can actually go there. Let's see.
Let's hope, unless it's like an ad, those sneaky MSNers.
It's a freaking TMZ article. So they linked it to the TMZ article. I guess they're showing this one. Are they talk about this one? Oh, there it is.
Well, I don't know for sure. It could be kombucha for all I know. You know what I mean?
There's like a red kind of like hair thing.
Right, that I see for sure.
Out. That's the. I guess they're saying that that's the wig. I mean, I don't know if that's alcohol. That could be anything.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny because they want to point, the drugs. I feel like if it was a couple of years ago, they could have just said it was the election and Trump and she had derangement syndrome. But they're back to the old game. And if I wish I paid more attention to reality in the sense of like, when's Super Bowl again? Because I always think of the superb owl as the sacrificial time of the year. You've got every major sacrifice that I can remember from Chris Farley and, what's his Phil
Hartman?
Phil Hartman, no, his wife got him. But Phil, what's the guy? Philip, he played in the Scientology movie. And, God, what's his name? Died Super Bowl. Oh, man.
Maybe somebody in the chat will know.
Who's the blonde guy? And what's the movie called? The Prophet? Or what's the movie about the Scientologists?
I have no idea.
Man, this is killing me. I can't believe I can't remember.
Movie about Scientology.
Killing me. Okay, he's also in the blonde guy, and he's in so many movies.
There's so many blonde guys.
He's a star of Love, Lisa. I'm sorry.
Love Lisa
movie.
Not Macaulay Culkin. No. This dude. I know exactly who you're talking
about.
Philip
Seymour Hoffman. I think I said, did I say anything like that? I hope
you said Phil. You said Phil, and I should have caught. I'm
always on first name levels with these people. I don't know what's going on.
I know, right? Oh my God.
Philip Seymour Hoffman was killed on Super Bowl, or he was suicided on Super Bowl. It was very much like the Home Alone movie. Thank you, Keenan. See, my people. I know Keenan. I'm glad he knows.
It's so funny because somebody told me to read my chat, and the chat literally had frozen. And then all of a sudden it like went boop, and it was like all these people are like Philip Seymour Hoffman. I'm like, I was looking to see if somebody names it, and nobody was naming it until they all did.
The simulation is slowing down. It chugs up sometimes, but that was a good example. There's also, from 90210 who died on Super Bowl.
Yes, Luke Perry.
Yes. And if you keep doing it, you'll find Super Bowl is the superb owl. That's what it is. It's the owl ritual, and they have this cremation of care that's large for Sunday, and it's to this. Remember the Super Bowl human trafficking bust, where instead you had Trump busting thousands of human traffickers and saving hundreds of kids. Right. So
wow, dude, you're blowing my mind right now, man. Holy shit. It's like all these like connections. I'm like that guy and Charlie and like friggin'
I feel like Charlie all the time. My shirt is knitted from the red lines of Charlie.
That's amazing. I love it. Wait, what?
Oh, and someone brings up Bourdain. I
haven't seen that.
I'll just hit my chest for you for Anthony Bourdain. I met him in Paraguay, I remember. And way more interesting and way cooler than I expected. Say that.
Dude. That was another crazy one too. That poor guy though. I feel like he did it himself. Like I think he did end himself because I think he couldn't take the fact that his girlfriend was like fucking crazy and was sleeping with that minor, and then he found out.
I mean, maybe, maybe. I think we're safer if we agree on that.
You're like, I'm not gonna get your channel banned.
I will just,
tonight,
no, I'll
bro.
just say I did used to work with Anthony Bourdain at CNN, right? So I did interact with him, and in other countries, and I don't necessarily. I mean,
You don't think he was the ending himself type?
Dude, and the scarf thing. Anybody who silk scarfs a doorknob, that's a thing too. That was Mick Jagger's wife. They, silk scarfing to a doorknob is a thing that happens to people.
Wait, didn't Robin Williams do that too?
Silk scarf, doorknob, dead. Exactly. Good go. Good. When you start tying it together, it's a lot. It's a lot to just say, yeah, I guess they're all just doing it that way. Especially guys who have drugs are doing it that way. It's hard to believe.
I thought Robin Williams was just into like asphyxiation, and it fucking all went wrong.
That was George Carlin tried to warn us about that. He said, hey, they're going to tell you. He didn't quite so many words, but he did do a special where he mentioned that the youth are getting into this idea of autoerotic asphyxiation because it was becoming more and more of this is the easiest way to shut up the society about the death, because so many people don't want to hear about it. It's just boom, gone. And so you don't have to look into it beyond that. And they've done that a number of times,
and then he did do that. That was such a weird. That was random, man. That was crazy. Just like this guy right here was saying the whole encounter was so strange. He said very, very random.
Right?
Was it though?
That's the thing.
And that this is so interesting and fascinating. I mean, R.I.P. to you.
Right. It's and the thing is, because she did Toxic Skies, she did Volcano, which is also on the same level as human trafficking and Toxic Skies, the level of volcanoes that are controlled. People don't even realize volcano power and what the implications connected to Epstein and Maxwell because of the Terra Mars project and volcanoes, whole other thing, right? But she's done movies on so many issues. And of course, this movie, and it's another Avicii, right? Avicii was working on a human trafficking movie and he was taken out too.
And this is this whole section here just made me laugh because it was just the title, the certified bozos claim Anne Heche was murdered. It's the amount they're so dismissive still of anyone who wants to think outside.
Specific. They pick such specific things that are no one I know said that. Who said that? I didn't say that.
Nobody said that. And of course they haven't linked a certain a single one either. Who are these all TikTok people that you're talking about? I haven't seen any.
I'm sure that there are TikTokers that are, because the thing is, then you're looking at the trickle down. And that's why Alex Jones got in trouble, because he was saying, hey, look at the trickle down. There's not enough people talking about this that are actually talking about it correctly. There's going to be more conspiracies. Meg's wrong. There's going to be people making, here's an example. And this is, here, they should be doing the same thing. Look, no one's looking into it correctly. So you're going to have TikTokers that are at the end of the telephone game that are going to be like, yep, someone just took Anne Heche out with a banana gun or something. No, it's it's a lot more complicated. But if you've seen that movie Society from 1989, where they kill the kid legally, but then he's still alive so that they can eat him later, right? And
they've seen that. What? No, I haven't seen that movie.
And ironically, I didn't quite spoil it for you because it's even weirder than I said. I made it as simplified as possible. But the Society from 1989 is very much about this idea that organ harvesting. I think also Monty Python's The Meaning of Life does the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Because they said, hey, she's legally dead, but we're going to keep her alive for organ transplants. And they just took her off with it, again, was it today or yesterday?
Yeah, because they did do that too. I did read that they were waiting to see if she can get organ transplanted or whatever. And
now, if this was in ancient Egypt, we would have the same thing happened in ancient Egypt. That's all I'm saying.
Dude, this movie looks fucking terrifying. This Society movie.
Oh, it's great. It's great. And it was, you know what? You're going to love it more. Canadians and people from the rest of the world love this movie more than Americans. Americans didn't get it because the idea of there being this society that is preying upon the weak, I don't know. Maybe it's just confusing to Americans. I don't think maybe it's just beyond their perspective, but it was so accurate.
America's just so young, right? They haven't really gone through certain things, for example, in Iran, we went through our revolution and everything like that. So we've seen some shit.
I was gonna say, how old is Iran? 1950s?
Yeah.
1970s? You know what I mean? So it's this is the 50s. Irony. We think of America, sure, it's thousands of years old if you count the Native Americans. Prussia was before Germany. Yeah, we can do that, but really, how old is anybody? I think America is one of the the older ones at this point. You got Haiti and Morocco, and then you got the United States, and then everything after that is pretty much all new states since Cecil Rhodes.
That's true. Okay, let me ask you something else because you brought up Ezra Miller and you shared this other picture with me.
He is, they are America's spirit animal. I think that is
because what the hell?
The mind control, like the levels there of, it's everything. It's all of the MK Ultra programming all at once, full crazy, just, running around. It's just, I don't know, blows my mind.
Well, the thing with Ezra, and because I've done a couple of extensive videos on his life and stuff like that, and he definitely seems like he was part of something. Like something happened to him, like Holly Weird. I think he was groomed and very much abused. And I think it's just something that has kind of like been ongoing for a really long time. And Ezra kind of just seems to know where all the bodies are buried or who's got what mole in what place kind of thing. So it just seems like he's one of those people that they really want to protect him at all costs. Like they just don't want this guy to go out there and start naming names.
Yeah.
But that or if they can't control him, though, would they take him out? Because I would think that this is the kind of person that would be, suicided if he's not willing to work with them and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if is that what they want? Like, do they really want Ezra Miller?
I'm asking you. I don't know. I don't know what they want.
I think that Ezra Miller, he represents a lot of what Americans want to do. Also, there's a number of naysayers that are like, hey, this guy's hurting people and it's wrong. Yeah. How many Americans are obsessed with the opportunities that this guy, he's beyond Bieber, beyond anybody. He's doing all the crazy. He's all holds bar. He's just picking up bottles from, not just from supermarkets, but from families and just living his life without any sort of responsibility. It's all freedom, right? He's just completely, you got a fast pass there,
He's just living his best life.
He's living his best life. It's terrifying, but I think that's kind of part of that's part of the thing. They're like, hey, look, you too could have this. And, you remember during the Trump administration, there was that correlation with Pizzagate and this idea that, hey, maybe he is going to just bust everybody who's raping kids. And maybe we should probably keep quiet about that or stop. Whereas they're saying, hey, look, if you keep feeding us, then you might also be allowed to be as derelict, diabolical, degenerate, and degrading of other human lives as we get to be sometimes.
And that's the interesting part, because Andreas, you said something really interesting in the Chrissy Mayer podcast that I was listening to. And it was the fact that you mentioned that there's a sect of people that are basically decriminalizing human beings. So, and what that means is that whoever these criminalized people are going to be able to do whatever the fuck they want without any consequences whatsoever.
Right.
And
the word license in the Black's Law Dictionary is defined as the permission to do what you would otherwise not be allowed to do. And so what we've done is make it that everything requires a license. You're allowed to do nothing, essentially. And so that eventually there might be a problem there with the pursuit of happiness thing, but there hasn't been yet. We've allowed it through time, space, and manner. So they just say, okay, sure. Eventually.
Well, I think of it more like kind of like someone like Ezra Miller is a great prototype for something like that, but also people like Hillary Clinton, where, like, for example, you saw her hypocrisy during the Trump raid and how she came out and she said something like, she was shilling for her stupid merch that said, like, on her hat, like, but what about her emails or something like that? And she's just kind of like just egging everybody on, like, oh yeah, like, remember her emails thing? Like, these people can't touch me, bro. Like,
Right.
And so I feel like those kind of people that the hypocrisy that they're exemplifying kind of shows this idea that these people are decriminalized and they cannot be touched. And I feel like that's kind of where we're headed now in terms of like right thing and wrong thing. So if you end up being in the right thing or whatever, then you might be decriminalized. You might be like, okay, if you're for the LGBTQ and whatever translates and all this stuff, if you check all these boxes, then maybe you could do whatever the fuck you want and get away with it. Do you think that's kind of like that?
There's like, so I mean, it's just a continuity of feudalism. So, you know, you give people corn or food or privilege, and in this circumstance, it's not for you know, reaping the cotton or something. It's for reducing the amount of self-determination of the whole against the unique, and so the unique can continue to grow more and more powerful every generation, because every generation you just give privileges to the serfs that are able to take away from the other serfs, and you reward them. You say, okay, well, you can stay in, you know, this is a very Malcolm X point, but you can stay closer to the house, away from the field workers. And it's very much like that as generations go on. And you see it because you've got this this idea, okay, the left are supposed to be a group of people that are trying to bring rights or, you know, affluence to the lower class. Well, of course, the left are also bringing Biden, who's bringing 87,000 armed IRS agents to take taxes, not from the millionaires who, you know, because 10 million is even not that much. So they're pushing it down and they want to get more. And then the people that have 50,000 a year saying, oh, $75,000 is too much. So anyone from 75 to $200,000, you're going to pay the brunt. If you've got, you know, if you work, you're going to pay the brunt of taxes, and it's going to be at the end of a gun, right? And that is the irony, because the left is the only way to get to the anti-left. You take the left that doesn't, you know, this for the people ideology, and you use that to sell the technically right, you know, oligarchical, let's say, instead system, because they're saying, well, we'll just push it because it's good for people. And, you know, you have to feel like, so more and more we're doing this thing, you know, where we're switching it around. I don't think that we're going to get out of it.
You don't think we're going to get out of it?
I don't think that. So what I see is there's the fourth turning. So every generation is working towards the next generation taking away even more rights from the next generation, which is why this generation, they're saying we need to take away what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a man, and take away even, because if you take away that, you're also taking away the word mama from babies. You have to remember that. You're calling them birthing persons. And so that's really
they've been doing that.
That's a hard one, though. When you take the first word out of humans' mouths away from them, generally, I think my first word was no, coincidentally, not even kidding. But if it was
mine was what's this in Farsi?
Based. See, that's good. This is better. A lot of people are supposed to be mama, and you know, it might say more about us than about the rest of the world. But the fact is, if you take away the programming, step one, step two might not happen after. And so this idea of kind of disconnecting the human organism from its programming, to have it, like I think Netflix says for the AI show, Raised by Wolves. This will be Raised by Wolves. That's Raised by AI.
I love that show. That was a good show. I'm so sad they canceled it. I was like,
because it was good. That's how that happens.
I know, right? It's like the only thing that's good, and it's like, oh, sorry, we're canceling this. God. Stefan Callan, thank you so much for the $5. Says, wait, what? Jareg, pronounced Che Guevara. Che Guevara is running for mayor of Ottawa. He wants to build a Moscow-inspired wall and annex any neighbors that want to join. What?
It sounds like
true?
Remember that South Park with Saddam Hussein took over Canada, or was it Trump or something? I forget. This feels very like that, you know. And
wasn't that the South Park movie that was? Oh my God, the Saddam thing was funny. I don't know.
It was great. I love South Park. Really, they're underrated. They even by the people who praise them. But Canada, I was going to comment on this earlier because you're talking about how you were progressive or leftist when you were younger or something to that effect. And I don't know if that's the correct terminology again, because, you know, sometimes we just go along with things because we're going along with a more important thing. So to go along with Canada is to kind of say we're different than the United States. We're not going to be with the United States on certain issues. And the United States does this. We're clearly not going to do that. And, you know, progressivism is a Canadian tenet in a certain sense, right? It's almost even continually a conservative value to continue, except for in parts of the Midwest, albeit Winnipeg and things, and British Columbia, to push for social medicine to remain, because social medicine is a Canadian value. It's not a left value or right value as much as it's like hockey. You know, it's a thing that is part of the Canadian image. It's not necessarily good for Canada. It doesn't help the Canadian citizen. It could be all these other issues. The left could do it differently. The right could do it differently. But I think there's a general consensus. America's not doing it, so Canada should.
That's Fascinating, dude. That's what I used to always call Canada America Light.
Right? With less calories. That's the most important
exactly. It just was less calories. But I mean, we became much worse though. Canada became much worse and much more totalitarian than I ever thought that it could possibly happen in Canada. Like when COVID hit, there was a time where I thought, like, I really didn't think Canada was going to go in that direction, and then it did, and I was like, "What the fuck? Like, what happened?" And I mean,
and again, Trudeau's not a new issue, right? He's a recurrent. I mean, he might be a little Castro-esque, but he is Trudeau-ish, a Trudeau-esque. So there's a repetition going on, and it's important to remember, Trudeau Sr.'s Montreal oligarchy, because we think about how there was an immigrant population. There's 1 million Russian speaking in Canada. I think there's 1 million Chinese speaking in Canada. There's a lot of Persians in Canada. There's a lot of groups that could have their own Montreal. That's all I'm saying. And I'm very Francophile, to be honest. I think, Johnny Holiday and things. I have in my mind, I think French thoughts. But at the end of the day, sometimes I lived in France. I don't mind France. I used to hate it before I went there, and I was like, "Oh,
I hate France," and I've been there.
I hate Paris. I hate
Paris. You know what? I stand corrected.
Paris is rough. It's
Paris
not fun.
Is rough. South of France is great.
South of France is the best. If you live in the south of France, and there are ATMs to get baguettes out of, like soda machines. You can get a baguette.
I know.
That hour.
Dude, Toulouse is a fucking great town. I've been there. Nice.
West France. So many. If you go, all these places are cool. But if you go to the municipal urban zone of any place, going to be rather similar. There's an urban quality there. It's scarcity based. There's people that are getting out all the time. They can't survive. It's a lack of abundance. It's a completely different ideology.
It's very true. I mean, I guess I stand corrected in terms of hating.
My point being, though, that the French don't make themselves look any better with Paris. They should focus on Biarritz or Nantes or anyway. Jules Verne's from Nantes. Focus on Nantes. But, Quebec is cool, too. It's just this idea that there's only French Canada versus British Canada, because it does make this dynamic, and it could be Iran Canada, and there certainly is Chinese Toronto. And if you don't believe in Chinese Ontario, it's there,
there's
too.
There's Chinese Vancouver. I'll tell you right now. It's
Chinese Vancouver have 100-year leases. Yeah,
they literally changed the signs of the street to Mandarin. Like we don't even have English signs there anymore. Like in Richmond,
welcome to K-Town and Los Angeles. We did the same thing. I will say though, it's a good thing in a lot of the cases. Like that's why I say it doesn't need to just be a French Canada. A Korean Canada might be cool too, because when Koreans came to K-Town, it was dirty until they got there. And then Korean ladies took brooms to the streets literally and cleaned the streets. It's like, it's hard to even explain.
That's
you had to just see it. And then you've got, the people will say, hey, there's these riots. The Koreans are on the rooftop defending their stores, right? Korean, it's not the worst thing when you have an immigrant population come in and try to hold up. And, a lot of time they're there because they have issues with whatever they came from. So that can be a good thing. We just miss out on that because we're always getting people that are like, oh, I don't want to leave. Why do I have to come here? Can I go back home?
It can be, but it can also be really fucking problematic. And I think I actually think that's what the problem was, is I don't think we were ready for the level of multiculturalism that happened in Canada. I don't think we were ready. Like we're not evolved enough. Like in terms of our mentality, like it's kind of like the way people think about Star Trek, and they're like, well, why can't we be like Star Trek, right? And you think to yourself, well, Star Trek is in the 24th century. That there has so many different things. So many things have to happen before we get to that point. And I think like that's what Canada tried to do, is they tried to skip certain steps before you get to that place. And therefore the multiculturalism completely kind of failed, actually, because it just became this place of where everyone just conglomerates with their own sect and then separates themselves from everyone anyway. And then it's created all these divisions, actually. So it's just a really weird scenario that's gone down. 200 Watt Studios is in the house, says just finished The Terminalist. What an awesome show. It was great. Nice. Have you seen The Terminal show? The Terminalist? Yeah, it was good. Well, because we're gonna wind down the show a little bit, but while we wind down, we're going to talk about some weird shit, because you're all about the weird shit. So I gotta ask a couple of questions about the weird, crazy kind of stuff, like the fact that, for example, you explained that you kind of, you work for NASA a little bit, like you were an intern, you said.
Stoichiometric indexing.
Okay, whatever that means. Okay.
So like
great.
you look at the difference in a material, like if it's like how much of it is polymer, how much it's a ratio of materials that make up a compound.
Okay. So, and that's really interesting, because I was wondering about the fact that, like, for example, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, the US government came out and said basically that alien tech exists. And yes, aliens exist. They exist. They're here, whatever. They've been here. And it kind of went under everybody's radar. So first of all, I was wondering in NASA if you ran into any alien tech, or anyone who knew of alien tech, and give us the inside scoop.
God, that's a loaded question. You might not even realize, but let's say okay. So first off, everybody loves aliens. NASA especially.
I don't.
NASA loves the idea of ET and aliens, and everybody wants to be an alien. And NASA, they think it's a cool idea, and the idea that it's harmless to imagine about Roswell is not as pervasive with everybody, but it is definitely there. There's a number of people that are like, Velcro came from Roswell, right? Like when they got in there and they were walking around the ship, they got stuck to it. And they're like, what is this? And that's where, and so there's all of these things along the way. I did a video a while ago.
Yeah, I remember, like, there's like microwaves and like all sorts of the disc, the CD, like, all sorts of stuff. Came
laser
out,
optical printing, capacitance discs, micro memory storage. But the whole thing is, so Roswell's a good story for the reason of the MJ-12 document, and the granddaughter of Eisenhower, who's talked about it as well. That Roswell happened, and X-Files got episodes about this. They got a team together, about 12 guys, 6 to 12 guys. Maybe I think it's 12. And I did a thing like a few years ago on every single one of them. And what they
all watch this.
They all say, we went to Roswell, we saw nothing. But then they go away and they're like, and I had this idea about 6 months later for the MOSFET solid state semiconductor, which would be made out of 3 new compounds made out of varying stoichiometric arrangements of silicon and lithium and whatever. And it's a very Terminator, we found this thing. We don't know what it is. We don't even know what it's made of. Let's start making the parts along the way to get to that point. So it's a popular story. Going beyond that, you got Maria Orsic and the Vril Society. Their whole thing was, hey, we're getting a message from space. This medium lady who's half German, half Croatian is telling us it's a vacuum. Oh, it's a vacuum. And they're giving us all of these tools so that they can disrupt the feminist house and the family nucleus at the time. The power was in the home, right? And if you take away and you automate it, and the corporations, the men and everyone has to work in order to buy the things, they're taking care of the home now. So they're taking care of the home, really. Then it's a disruption tech. And then you got this idea of seances in the 19th century, which are pretty fascinating.
That's so good. I've read about that stuff, man. So
dude, they didn't have TV, so they would like talk to ghosts and stuff. But they would also,
that whole thing is so cool, because they talk about like the different sect of science, like Freud and them, and how they were like basically like they're trying to like they didn't want that to happen. They were like they cut them off, and they were like, we don't want to talk about mediums,
right.
Like,
but what that did was it led all that stuff to technology. So the people that were divorced from Freud and even from Jung went on to, and before Jung actually, but it's pervasive, taking the 19th century Nikola Tesla ghost seeking electronic technology. And they weren't building that for CNN. They didn't make TV because they wanted CNN to broadcast. They wanted to see ghosts and aliens. That was the invention.
Well, they also wanted to study the science of the spirit. That was the other. They wanted to figure out what the soul is, and actually, like, if there is a soul, and understanding like esotericism and that kind of thing, like, because you had the whole argument about the church at the time, and what is a soul, and blah blah blah. Right. They were like, well, we can scientifically study the soul, and then through basically mediums and all that kind of stuff, we're going to be able to contact the soul or the spirit or whatever it is that leaves, and then the afterlife and blah blah blah. But the hard scientists like Freud and them didn't want want them to go near that kind of stuff. They wanted to.
Well, it's funny to call Freud a hard scientist because he was pretty. I mean, he was a coke addict who was a schizophrenic. There's a reason why Jung walked away from him. But I love a lot of what Freud said some really important things, like, for instance, Moses is Akhenaten. I've been all these videos recently looking at it, and I am 100% convinced that Moses' story that Josephus and the Bible tell is about exactly the story of Akhenaten and his sun-worshipping cult out of Amarna and the temple city they built and how it was torn down and how he was sent to the desert and all of it's connected. So Osarseph, it's all there. But, I'm not the first to say that. Freud is, at least, maybe not the first, because Josephus might have made the connection, but Freud brings it up. So he does a lot of really useful things, but even Jung said, hey, we got to walk away.
Yeah.
And by the
Jung was like, dude, you're getting a little weird when he started talking about the whole mom thing.
Right.
Like,
but then Jung took it to the logical conclusion, which is that Teddy Ruxpin might be your mother. Like, if you weren't raised by your mother, there might be a new symbology that can make sense.
Right. The feminine energy.
If we can deduce, well, that's even further, was his Reich. But if we can deduce what it is that, maybe Eric Romm's Art of Loving, the mature love is the feminine love, is the releasing love, which is that's all important. But then serotonin research starts to emerge, and they're like, hey, you know what? It might not be your mom. It might be a chemical imbalance. We've taken that too far as well. But in the 50s and 60s, you've literally got proof that people aren't able to have sex or sleep or eat without certain kinds of chemical balances. And we can take those chemicals away from rats and kill them, or we can help humans live longer with sorts of research tryptamines that have been made available, like alpha-methyltryptamine did amazing research that helped Alexander Shulgin's documentary, Dirty Pictures, all about thousands of research chemicals that are not copyrighted or patentable. So these corporate pharmaceutical companies have no interest in them. And of course, it wasn't just that Timothy Leary was crazy. He literally did have some points that pharmaceutical companies could be screwed if people just moved on from one experience. Now, you could have the worst psychedelic experience of your life. You could have the best. It could be driven by a therapist who's helping you. And in circumstances where someone's suffering from emotional post-traumatic stress from the military, I don't think anything could be possibly better. And I don't care if George Soros is financing MAPS. I mean, if a soldier had, ecstasy so they can have the serotonin, so they can have a therapist help them process something, sometimes that's important and that's valuable.
Well, that's those are fascinating studies. I've read about them as well. And those are,
I've known some friends who do that. And they've blocked out things and they can finally process them. They're like, I didn't even remember,
Well, that's the thing too. It's kind of like ancient studies as well, because they've talked about, people like Carlos Castaneda have noted things like that through the stories of Don Juan, and how those kind of psychedelic drugs kind of actually open up your mind to the next level, or if you're ready to go to that level, you will be. And there's certain things that psychedelics do help, and I think the study of it is fascinating one, especially the one about PTSD and LSD and how it helps people. I believe that it would. I think that it's very plausible that it would.
But there are also issues there, and so serotonin led to John C. Lilly, the CIA, and I've got a good video at some point to check out called a complete and comprehensive history of MK Ultra and mind control.
I want to watch that video very badly.
It covers a lot of this stuff, but there's also my Echo the Dolphin series, because the thing is, and I know this doesn't make sense, but I swear it does. It's all connected. John C. Lilly was hired by the CIA to reverse engineer Albert Hoffman's LSD formula, and he created a number of new chemicals along with certain labs in New Jersey working on a non-addictive substitute for codeine for the OSS and FBI and CIA to use in mind control, because they were doing truth extractions, and they figured that if you gave someone heroin addiction and you took away their heroin, then the pain would cause them to tell the truth. Scopolamine would also push them further. LSD seemed very useful. They wanted an air bombable LSD. They figured we drop it, no one dies, we can take over a place. Freedom, peace, love, dancing. It's the best war machine ever made. But John C. Lilly, his other thing was researching talking to dolphins. And there's this Drake equation with the aliens. They've got this whole idea that there's an equation where the expansion of the universe, while I'm talking about it, it's supposed to be getting bigger, right? And there's more and more places. And all these kinds of things divided by the chances of them making it, blowing themselves up, being blown up, or dying. There's a certain range of probability. And it spiked the day that John C. Lilly told his friends at the Epstein house in Virgin Islands, because Epstein bought the house where he was doing the dolphin research, where he had a girl, by the way, who would jerk off. He would teach a dolphin how to do the alphabet. So there's this dolphin going A, B, C, D, all recorded, but she's also jerking off the dolphin because it's become, they're living together in a house that's half submerged with an open aquarium, and the dolphin's beating up and raping the other dolphins.
What the fuck?
So the CIA eventually shut down the program, etc. The dolphin got really sad, went to the bottom of its tank and stopped its heart and just killed itself.
Oh,
super tragic.
That's
however
fucked up.
Before that, the day I'm talking about is the one where John C. Lilly says, hey, dolphins can speak, and not just that they can speak to each other, but clearly they have their own language, but they're learning how to speak English.
People are saying I'm about to get banned on YouTube. No, this is like pretty common knowledge. It's
fine.
I
mean, BBC's done stories on
this is
the dolphins. But yeah, I promise. But they did.
This is common-ish knowledge if you're around these circles.
You're allowed to know this. And so, but then this is why SETI exists, because John C. Lilly told his friends this at the Epstein house in Virgin Islands, which they all had these little pins made of silver dolphins, and they called themselves the Order of the Dolphin. But that name was too weird, because they were thinking to themselves, we all believe that we're going to find radio signals that are going to repeating, and then we'll learn that there's languages. But hey, if humans are the only ones that have language, they're not. Birds are copying us, and we're proving dolphins have their own language. Well, that just increases on the Drake equation. And granted, it's not completely true, but we do know now that animals have neural nets we're using to read pig calls and swine faces.
Absolutely, yeah.
They do have communication. So it's not, let's give Chomsky that. But the idea that there is an order of the dolphins that could lead to more things led to SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And so that is the connection to aliens, right? And if you've ever played Echo the Dolphin's going down to Atlantis in order to get the time machine, because he has every 500 years there's a reset. This whale's knowing the reset's coming. And so he has to go back and he has to stop the this crazy techno vortex queen, right? And so we hear these stories of aliens and this idea of light space and the distance light takes to travel. But we also know the idea of the quantum entanglement, that everything's coming from the same place. And the more advanced a civilization would be, which is another part of the Drake equation, that they would be able to travel beyond the speed of light. Well, to do that, you'd have to understand both, first off, how to travel in light, which is if you could take your mind and put it in another body, you'd probably use photonics, because you could send more data, because you can use a rainbow of data, right? It's every spectrum. So light travel. But then beyond light travel is quantum entanglement. So what that means basically is to be here already, because we've already been here before. So we're just relying on this quantum entanglement. If that's the case, then every far-flung, distant thing is here now, right? And even at different times, it's a femtotech arrangement. We talk about nano scale is atoms. Beyond that, subatomic particles, femtoquarks, right? If you could have a femto printer instead of a nano printer, a nano printer could print a plastic or a flower, but a femto printer could print a world. It could print a moment. It could print you. It could print everything in the arrangement that it is. So things could be recreated, and it could be that this idea of outer space is really just time. And it could be that these other worlds that we're seeing distantly are just holographically stacked. I think we talked about this idea of holographic.
Yeah, we talked about that when I was on your channel.
If that's the case, then yeah, it might be that we're like, oh, this thing is so alien, but it's really just an insectoid super soldier from 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now that's partially human still, or whatever that means.
Now, going back to my original question of which you totally dodged, and I'm not going to blame you, because I think you probably worked with alien tech, and that's totally fine. But what do you think of the fact that people didn't really care that the United States government kind of came out and was like, hey, yeah, aliens exist, I
think we're desensitized. We're desensitized to it so much. Again, with the Roswell thing, I didn't mean to totally dodge it. I think that the alien tech, you can insinuate that Vannevar Bush's Memorex system, which is this electronic magnetic microsystem invented 6 months after, or again, the burrs on the backs of sheeps being the inspiration for Velcro, this diamond carbon hook and loop system used for stamping boots on the side of a ship or walking on the roof, kind of hard to buy. So I kind of think Memex is the best example. You look at the internet was prophesized by this guy who's on the MJ-12.
But
Roswell.
What I mean though is, are you surprised by the apathy, like the complete apathy of people because for the longest time, people like that were into the UFO scene and people that were into that kind of stuff were like, are there aliens? Is there life out there? And then here comes the United States government basically saying yes, and no one seemed to care. Like no one cared.
It's hard. Well, there's every once in a while you see a Canadian in Parliament or whatever. Is that what you call it? I believe so. who's doing that? It brings it up, an old guy, or there'll be an Israeli State Department guy who brings it up, or this happens.
Yes, a lot of military folks.
Yeah, military folks will like to talk about it. I think it's also helpful for them to talk about it because then it can also be a metaphor for non-alien things involving the Chinese. Like, well, we're just not allowed to identify this craft created by this corporation that's been working with the CIA, with the Chinese government. It's like if a company is transnational, guess what? If it's a military industrial complex country or corporation, and it has no state bias. Guess what it does, right? You'll find that same helicopter and fighting against another version of itself from another state. So that's a thing too. But I do think alien technology is like such a confusing concept because is it really alien? Is it just from here, from the past and the future? And every generation, I mean, Tesla says he's getting things from median work. These 19th century radio inventors are getting things from median work. The real Victor Schauberger, who did the swirling of water cleaning systems and free energy systems.
Yes, that's
all these guys are into medium. They're all saying they're getting it from aliens, whatever you think aliens means or whatever they do. The Palladian. It's all this idea that there's 13 zodiac surrounding Earth, like in Battlestar Galactica. Earth is this Caprica that's surrounded, and the different zodiac, they might be very proximally distant in different directions from us, but one might arrive a few centuries before the other, right? You might have the Avians or the Draco or whatever you're calling, but it's again, these are light beings who built bodies for themselves. So if they're traveling at all, it might be through light, and that could seed an entire.
Do you find that could be more of a case, or do you think it's more of a case with like dimensional beings, like kind of like the Mothman? I think the Mothman is a dimensional being, but
I think Mothman. Okay, so there is a level of converging realities which can be converging timelines because of non-causality. So there could be different moments that are arranged so symmetrically similar to other moments in other timelines if they're singularly stacked that they might interact with each other. And it's hard to understand, but maybe 2022 right now could have been the most logical femto arrangement of 1668 and this other timeline, right? It's not about when it happens, but if they're all happening at the same time, there might be convergence on each other.
Ooh, man, you are just a bundle of knowledge and information. I am so like, I want to ask you so many more questions, but it's already been 2 hours. So I'm going to read these super chats and we're going to actually wind down the show. Yeah, we're going to actually wind down the show this time. And you're definitely coming back, and we're definitely having more of this kind of conversation because I am just fascinated. I mean, half of the things you said, I'm not even gonna lie, went way over my head. So I'm actually probably gonna even watch this on replay.
Yes, like, I love hearing that.
Okay, let me like Google some of these people this dude was talking about, because I'm like, what? Like some of the stuff you said, like, is very familiar, but some of the stuff you said is not familiar at all. So I'm like, you just fascinate me.
They try so hard to keep us in a narrow thing so we can't be broad, right? They don't want us to know about the other sides of things. I really think that's the most important thing we can try to do.
I'm so glad that I've met you. Like this is one of the.
You're the best.
Glad. I'm so happy. I'm so happy that we met each other. So Stefan clarified, saying that he's a big time YouTube and genius.
I don't know about that. Creator. I definitely feel like I could do better.
I mean, everybody can.
Right.
And then Clint Torres, aka Russell Hall, says Star Trek is also make believe.
You know what, though? I really quickly want to comment on that is that if you follow all of the huge humanity crises, disasters in Star Trek, they are poignantly aligned. If you watch Voyager, Deep Space Nine, all the other ones, it's like, and that with Heinlein Starship Troopers, they're following a timeline that leads them to this full you will own nothing and be happy resource feudal.
Dude, you just said that and reminded me, because I was watching this episode of DS9 like just the other night, and it was literally what is happening in San Diego right now, because they were talking about like the you know how have you watched Star Trek? Are you familiar with Star Trek?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, know
so
the
like,
enemy, right?
Yeah. You know how like they have, well, I love fucking Star Trek, but
no, I do too. But it's definitely communist propaganda. I just have to.
No way. I disagree. We'll have a debate later about that. But the episode is like how, you know how the main central thing for the Star Trek place is in San Diego. So like they go back in time, they get like
Sausalito. It's Sausalito.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, Sausalito, San Francisco is where the Vulcans.
San Francisco, that's right.
I mean, what? I don't want Star Trek. Sorry.
San Francisco. I always make up San Diego and San Francisco because it has a word.
One's the whale's vagina, and the other is the sausage, Sausalito. That's how I.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay, I'll remember that now. But okay, so they're there. Like Cisco and Bashir get transported there by accident because there's a time whatever. It's like the problem with the quantum wibbly wobbly timey wimey. So they end up there. And while they're there, the entire place, they kind of end up there in 2024. So,
right. That's right. I remember that. I totally remember that episode. Exactly.
Do you remember that episode? And I was like, we're literally watching it happen in 2 years.
Looks kind of like it will. As soon as the liberal aesthetic changes a little bit more in the Biden administration, you'll have those same women's suits.
Same women's suits and the same zones.
And Occupy is happening. There's like Occupy movement, and there's people that are like, we're gonna have to, dude. So I can't help but comment on that. That I have a friend who called me and told me that drones were following him, and I thought it sounded kind of crazy, but it's 2022. Could it be? Yeah, every state, every police force, they started slowly. They're like, we're gonna have a couple, and then we're gonna have a bunch, and then we're gonna watch only the homeless, and then we're gonna have thermal cameras for the migrants, and then eventually they're like, first responders will be drones everywhere, and they're just following. And so that episode, or I think it's a 2-episode arc at least.
Yes, it
covers how the homeless people, I think one of them or two of them, gets trapped in the socioeconomically disparaged group of nomads, and they have tracking IDs and things, and there's a wall, and they're living in the city's turned into a ghetto that's locked in. They can't get out.
Concentration camp for
it's Judge Dredd super city. You can't.
It is. It was nuts, but I was like, what I was thinking
after a virus.
It was after a virus too, and it was so crazy because I was thinking about, because it was talking about it's 2024, and I'm like, it's 2024 in 2 years, and it's literally looking like that's where we're headed. So I was freaking out about that episode the other night.
That's actually kind of, I think, maybe the primary episode that led me to say that whole thing, because Star Trek really does, and if you look into Next Generation's first episode talking about the breakdown where the police are living off these drug suits, that they give themselves drugs in order to, and that's the only kind of finance they have at that point, is you can feel good if you're a cop and you can enforce this tax system. I mean, if that's not tomorrow, it's the next day.
That's so crazy. Clint Torres also said for $2, do you disagree? Have you seen Picard? I have not seen Picard because I refuse.
It is definitely getting more communist propaganda, but I would argue it's always been that. If you go back,
I disagree. First
episode of Star Trek, before the pilot, which was with Captain Pike, which they've made a new series about. Pike is named after Albert Pike because he's a Freemason who wrote Morals and Dogma, and the original version of Spock was to be Anton LaVey. It was going to be a non-Jesuit administrator. It was going to be the advisor vizier of the Satanists. So the satanic humanism of again Aristotelianism, but it's really this Platonic, Socratic, whatever logic and ethics 101 at a community college would teach. That's what Gene Roddenberry knows, and his connections to Freemasonry. Anton LaVey, he loved Anton LaVey, was good friends. Was also friends with Michael Aquino, who is a military NSA. Church of Set. He decided to start the Temple of Set because he thought Jesus and Satan too close. Let's call it Church of Satan something not so Judeo-Christian. We'll call it the Egyptian Church of Set. And the amount of military Satanists that were involved and promised, trying to promise Star Trek that this is going to be the future we're going to have. Well, what is it? It's a military that you gotta be part of Starship Troopers. You gotta be part of the military. If your service guarantees citizenship, and you're living off of feces and carbon that's been femto printed by a replicator to live off of, even though every one of the Star Treks you've ever seen have fruit and vegetables growing for the elite circle of the crew, right? It's every single one of them are living off of the better thing. What's Picard do now? He grows his family's property.
The new one is not Star Trek.
But even in the old Star Trek, his family, the Picards have a winery, which is again an inter-party oligarchy on Earth because he's part of the military and is grandfathered in. Clearly, land isn't owned by many people anymore, right? So Star Trek pushes this narrative, and I would go further. It's not just communist propaganda because it's post-socialist, Marxist, neoconservatives. So once the neoconservatives, George Bush Sr. takes over the CIA, that's when Marxism works its way into the American mentality, and people don't get it, but it's literally that's when neoconservatives bring Marxism to the world to build this American oligarchical state. And so the NSA, that's the model for Star Trek, to boldly know what no one's known before and to listen in on other people who aren't at your level, right? This is that idea of licensed, to have sirens that allow you to go through stoplights. That is that. They're saying, okay, we're going to watch these people. And when we think and deem that where are they ready, how far do they progress, which direction, to our Atlanticist value system, when they're more like us, right? Because you can damn well believe that if they were Klingon-like or if they were Romulan-like, they would not be allowed, right? And then there's the whole thing with the Vulcans are this Jesuit, right? This Jesuit order that keeps secrets and for a century have just taken over the Earth. And it's like the Civil War. It's like right after the Civil War in the South, where you have martial law, and they're just forced to surrender to the ideology of the Vulcan, who are definitely screwed up. And that's why they eventually bring in Troy to say that being a Vulcan makes you a sociopath. So I don't know. It's not all communism, but I love it anyway.
Oh my God. I disagree with so much of what you said, but that's fine. We can agree to disagree. That's okay.
I can't wait though. Let's definitely do a Star Trek thing soon. I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely.
That'd be great.
Definitely. We're gonna talk. 200 Watt Studios for 2 says, let's talk about the turtle teasing and courting. Oh my God. Okay. All right. Here we go. This is a turtle. Wait, I don't have any of that stuff on here.
I don't know the context.
Studios. I do a show called Infinite Hope where I talk about good things and good whatever. So he actually has super chatted something else saying for $5, Andreas, great to see you here. Ask Nina to show you her clip of turtles on turtle sex. This is what he's bringing up. He's talking about my show Infinite Hope, where I just want to make people laugh and love and whatever. So we're gonna switch to that for a minute so I can show you these clips that he's requesting. So this is turtle courting, and then which leads to turtle sex.
Is that the female that's doing
the
this?
Male.
Oh,
the
that's
male does this.
Wow.
And it's also the male that does the
Adorable. That's cool. See, and I think it's important that they forget that guys peacock. It's not just girls being on lipstick.
Yep.
It's a male thing.
It's actually the male is the one that's the prettiest in nature, usually, like the lion or the birds or like anything. It's usually the males that are the prettiest. 200 Watt Studios for 2 says Freud's mom looked young for her age, but get out of here, 200 Watt Studios.
That wasn't bad. I mostly, when I think of Freud, I think of Freud's daughter more than his mom, and like the tragedy in Paraguay with Nietzsche's sister, right? And the kids, I think it's Freud's daughter's kids killed themselves. They came home after a long time.
I didn't know that.
They went to her house and they killed themselves in her house to make it clear that her ideas of sexual regression therapy were bad, right?
Dude, I didn't know that. That's fucking crazy. Okay, hold on. Wait, I forgot to change my
Dolphins can speak, but they cannot consent. I like that.
Oh my God.
Dolphins are pretty rapey, though. That's the thing. They're
have you ever seen that episode of King of the Hill when he gets raped by a dolphin?
No, I should watch more King of the Hill.
You should definitely watch that episode. It's the funniest episode. That's how I actually learned about the dolphin thing. I didn't know. By the way, I have been swimming with the dolphins. I've swam with the dolphins. I never got raped.
They didn't even breathe the back of your neck, like wasn't like a bite-in dolphin or anything? Nothing?
No, he was a very sweet dolphin. But you know what's funny though is he did have a girlfriend, and the girlfriend, he was trying to impress the girlfriend the whole time. So he would like just leave our group and go swim around the girlfriend's group. So our like person had to keep like calling it back to us and like feeding it fish so it would come back because it already had a girlfriend and didn't want to be around us. It was really funny.
See, it's an interesting how family will take you away from work. You know, I think that's
Well, he was like, I was actually kind of happy because I was like, oh, that means this dolphin is a girlfriend, so he's already getting jacked off by the girlfriend, so he's not gonna like, you know, come and grape me. Like it's fine. I was happy about it. 200 Watt Studios for 5 says, I think the Mothman lives in my closet because all my Angora sweaters have holes. 200 Watt Studios. Stop it.
I wouldn't be surprised that Mothman was like a genetically I mean, we talk about Atlantis having genetically modified super soldiers then. So Mothman could be a thing, but also coming through a trans-dimensional time portal. Anything's possible these days.
I totally think it's like some sort of dimensional situation, but I don't know.
I do want to say, I can't help myself. So I was thinking about Ninja Turtles because Ninja Turtles is all about the Montauk Project before Stranger Things, and Stranger Things does it too. They're like, have you seen Stranger Things? Because what they're saying is, have you heard of the Montauk Project? Because there's been Stranger Things in the Montauk Project. But the Philadelphia experiment and all the things connected to it of this interdimensional war, Project Camelot, Operation Camelot, the 20 and Back program, soldiers on Saturn and submarines in space, etc. That connects to Mothman pretty directly, right? So the Ninja Turtles idea is that there's this reptilian who's lost his body as a punishment from the Dimension X war, and his brain's been sent here, and that's Krang, right? And Krang has gotten into the world through the nuclear explosion in Japan, which is why he knows Shredder, and Shredder's part of the Yakuza, so he's helping the Yakuza become more powerful by saying, I'll give you all this technology, which is how Sony exists, in order that they can build him a body, right? And then there's the mutants and everything. So I love it because there's portals and there's ooze and there's genetic modification.
Love it.
I feel like Mothman can be part of that world.
I feel that. Mothman freaks me out though, I gotta say.
Right, yeah.
That was a good movie too. Did you ever see the movie? That was a good movie.
Yeah,
that was a good movie. Clint Torres for 5 says, you know who else would disagree that Star Trek is communist propaganda? Lofty Pixels. I rest my case. You know what, Clint Torres, Russell Hall, you could take that comment and shove it. Okay. Don't call me Lofty Pixels. Actually, I don't care.
I feel like Lofty Pixels would probably be like, yeah, no, it is, and it's great.
I feel like Lofty would be like, yeah, it's great. And I think he would agree with you that it is communist propaganda. And he'd be like, yeah, and I hope we get there because I love commies. That's what Lofty would
That's
say.
the thing. I think a lot of people don't actually disagree with me. They actually just don't think it's just not a good or a bad thing. For them, it's a good thing. For other people, it's a bad thing, you know?
Yeah, I just fucking hate communism. I think it's my sacred cow though, Andreas, because I think like I love Star Trek so much and I hate communism so much. So when you say that, I'm like,
oh yeah, for sure.
I am triggered.
But that's that thing. So again, with the centricism is going and regret, like heterodox is two opposites that are so opposite that they're actually one thing. So, you know, we think of communism as being told to us by this one thing. It's got to be so evil and bad. So it's good to have Star Trek show you this other version of it. So you have in your head also, why are people so gung-ho about this? What do they think is going to happen? They don't think it's going to be horrible. They think it's going to be this. So
they think it's going to be like this amazing Star Trek. Yeah, I know. But you know what? That's the only difference though, is that Star Trek is in the 24th century. We have a long way to go.
Well, there's definitely, I mean, okay. And I do love Scott Bakula's Enterprise. I know no one else does.
I do.
Well, cool.
I fucking love it.
I love that one. That's my favorite. And I think it's
really,
like,
is it your favorite one?
Yeah. I mean, I love all of them for their ways. I think Voyager's not as bad as people think, and I love Deep Space Nine because I think Deep Space Nine really proves that it's a communist enterprise or a federation in a world that's not, because the Ferengi are not, and the Ferengi that's a Frankish Arabic term, the Arabic word for Frank or foreigner. So the Ferengi are representing capitalism at its extreme, right? So
yeah.
there's a lot.
I love DS9 for that. There's so much stuff to talk about. Oh my God. 200 Watt Studios for 2 says my furry character is a Loch Ness monster.
Nice. The Argentinosaurus or the Loch Ness monster. I'm pretty sure cryptozoology. I was thinking this earlier when I was a kid. Like, don't be crazy. Well, don't be into conspiracy theories. What does that mean? What does that mean? Well, just don't worry about Bigfoot, Kennedy, UFOs, Roswell, tinfoil hats, anything like that. Well, I mean, that's just, I never heard any of those things beforehand. So it's all, why they matter. But cryptozoology is real. And I've seen examples of the Mokele Mbembe, which is it's a Loch Ness looking thing in Uganda and in the Congo.
How do you explain the platypus? Okay, I'm sorry, but there's
God was drunk, I assume.
I know there's like certain creatures on Earth that like make no sense. Like for example, bats. Like and how that they
bats are the best. I love bats.
They're great, but they make no sense in terms of nature. It just seems.
Why don't they make sense? Do you think?
I feel like there's a design there, like the fact that they fucking poop explosives.
Yeah, bats are amazing. And
bats are really weird.
What's that thing that they make? Radar. Luciferin or whatever. They have that thing that breaks the blood apart. So vampire bats when they it can stop you. It can give you what's it called where you keep bleeding.
Yeah, I forget what the thing's called, but I know what you're talking about. They're fascinating creatures. Same with mosquitoes. Mosquitoes seem like a really weird. I hate mosquitoes, but they're really fascinating in the way that they're designed. So sometimes it feels like
humans are the least. We're the worst design of anything, which is why we invent, telescopes because we don't have the eyes of eagles. Right.
We're always breaking down. Clint Torres 5 says, "You're right. We don't know what kind of future the backdoor communist propaganda will lead us into because we haven't seen it yet. It could be good."
Well, not everything can be all as bad as we think. And
that's
I think
what Lofty says all the time. I haven't seen it yet. It could be good.
I think that's important. I think, a lot, like, it's kind of like the world is full of this idea that these are the problems. I think that's good. I was talking to the guy who wrote The Postman, David Brin, and he said, and he works for, he's a writer, but he's a sci-fi writer that the CIA and alphabet agencies will hire to talk about sci-fi. And he said, how many times has it happened where the world did not end because of a sci-fi writer story? That's some crazy American movie, and it led to new systems and infrastructure being put in place to stop it. On the other hand, because of that, it's really thematic that the utopia is a dystopia. Every future story is about the end of the world coming because we did some change, and the only way to fix it is to return to tradition. And this isn't the right making these movies. This is the left. So it's kind of interesting that is the logic there. But I do think that every time someone thinks, oh, this is going to be the end, oh man, newspapers, when people get newspapers, they're never going to speak to each other again. Well, that's not always true. And the same thing with cell phones, like people looking at their phones, we're talking to each other on other sides of the world. We have to acknowledge that it's not going to be as bad as just the worst of it.
Sure. I mean, I'm always about looking at the cup half full, as always. And on that note, I think this is a really good place to actually end it now. So thank you so much, Andreas, for being here tonight and talking to me and blowing my mind, because I'm like, oh my God, there's so much stuff and I want to talk about it more, but you're gonna have to come back. You're gonna have to come
Nina,
back.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you for having me, and we'll definitely do it again soon.
We're gonna do it again soon. 200 Watt Studios for 2 says backdoor anything is communist. Oh my God, that's how you also get monkeypox.
Or they're gonna call it Trump 22 now.
Are they? Is that what's going on?
Yeah.
The monkeypox is turned
Trump 22.
Everybody in the chat, love you guys. Thank you for being here. If you press the super chat button, extra thank you. If you press the membership button, extra thank you. Thank you guys also very much for being here and listening to us tonight. And we'll be back. I'll be back this Friday with some good news to balance out this crazy-ish. So 2:45 Eastern, come hang out with me. Let's listen to some good stuff. Until next time, take care, everybody. Bye.
Peace.